Reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Chancellor delivers his spring statement today, but will it help those who need it most?
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Thank you for watching and indeed listening. We're live across your TV, your radio, online, and here's what's leading the news on this Wednesday morning.
The Chancellor will present his spring statement today to the House of Commons. We'll find out how his decisions will affect the pound in your pocket.
We'll hear from small businesses, breweries and you, the GB News viewers, about the cost of living, what the government needs to do to help you most and those most in need.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russian forces have entered the Ukrainian city of Mariupol after two massive explosions rocked the city. One human rights organisation has described it as a freezing hellscape riddled with decaying dead bodies and destroyed buildings.
Search for survivors continues after a plane carrying 132 people crashed in southern China. We'll bring you the details.
And don't forget, we really want to hear from you today. All of your emails and all of your tweets are read. We'll read the best ones out. gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
The big talking point on the home front this morning is that the Chancellor will deliver his much-anticipated spring statement to the House of Commons.
Yeah, originally intended to be just a simple economic update. The war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis has transformed it into a key moment for the Chancellor.
Well, skyrocketing energy bills and inflation have meant that many families and small businesses are struggling to make ends meet and are appealing to the government for relief. Indeed, you may be one of them.
The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is tipped to make security the focus of his speech today, not just in the form of weapons and aid to Ukraine, but also in the security of resilient public finances and a faster-growing economy.
He'll reportedly vow to stand by hard-working families and help with the escalating cost of living crisis. Many are hoping for a cut to fuel duty and a delay to the rise in national insurance.
But after his unprecedented financial support for many during the pandemic, there are questions over how far Rishi Sunak will go in this statement, despite pressure to spend and borrow more.
In his autumn budget last year, he made clear that his intention going forward would be to balance the books and cut taxes in the future. But his tenure as Chancellor so far has been defined by massive spending and taxes at the highest level for 70 years.
Well, to take us through what to expect in that statement in the House of Commons later today is the Head of Research and Analysis at ETX Capital, Andrew Sachs. Good morning to you. Welcome back to the programme. Look, there's been this windfall for the Prime Minister, and I just take an example of the front of the FT. Sunak to lay aside windfall cash rather than helping households. Now, a lot of people are already critical of him pushing for a national insurance hike when we're already facing a cost of living crisis. Given that they're getting this revenue from tax receipts, is this a bad decision?
I think it could potentially be one that loses votes, especially when you consider that the actual less vocal voices within the Conservative government have actually quite often said to him that this is not really a vote winner and they are against these particular measures. This has happened before. So what we have now is a position where you have, as you rightly say, the individual members of the public being potentially hit by a national insurance rise, which is very expensive if you think about it. If you've got people, especially in London, actually one particular commentator, market analyst this morning said London will probably be hit the highest by these things, because in London, if you have an average salary of say 60, 70,000, that's the kind of people are just getting by on that. And therefore
But you can't have it every way, Andrew. This is paying for the health service and the social care service that people say they want, and that has to be paid for.
It does indeed, absolutely right. And I think it's a question of looking at how to, exactly as you rightly said earlier, this particular Chancellor has a reputation in the eye of the public. Whether it's right or wrong is something, but the reputation is that he has spent and taxed. So what you've got here is a black hole of £11 billion where over the last 2 years, the furlough scheme, Rishi Sunak's furlough scheme, some of that was misappropriated and it was never been claimed back. So Companies House are now looking at how to, there's a lot of companies being struck off the register, being voluntarily struck off the register at the moment. Companies House is blocking those. Actually, I spoke to Companies House last week and they are blocking quite a few applications to strike off companies because they're pending an inspection as to whether they spent what they spent the money on, basically.
Yes, whether they make fraudulent claims.
That's right, fraudulent claims on the furlough scheme and on the bounce back loan schemes.
Yes.
So some of them are under investigation for that. And there isn't really much recourse over it. So what perhaps they could do, I mean, it's not really for me to say, but let's say what they could do is potentially try to keep the markets flowing and the retail side of things by keeping the public able to afford certain things, and then look to recuperate some of that particular cash. 11 billion, it would go quite a long way to bridge that gap, I suppose.
So they would get that back through people spending money and paying income tax and getting VAT returns and things. So it just keeps the economy...
Keep the economy turning over. Exactly.
Right.
So Andrew, just explain the role in inflation in all of the announcements today, because we already talked a little bit about how that's boosting number 11 in terms of its revenue from tax, but is also increasing the amount it's having to pay in these interest debt repayments that they've incurred throughout the pandemic. So it's sort of giving with one hand, taking with the other.
It is, and that was inevitable, I suppose. That anyone really with a forecasting mind would have seen that the 2 years of paying out a lot of what appeared to be relatively free money. And keeping the economy going based on paying people to stay at home and giving companies loans which were backed by the state, eventually somebody's going to have to pay for that, because the economy was really down to a very low level 2 years ago and brought down very quickly to that. Someone's going to have to pay for it. So the inflation started to creep up over the course of that period. Some American commentators have been saying that the US government is putting out figures of, say, 6-7% inflation, highest in 30 years. But really, when you go down deeper, it could be already double figures.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shocking, yeah.
So this is really getting towards, we spoke about this before, getting towards the 1991 levels of high inflation. So, of course, there's then wage inflation. And the wage inflation is something that's being looked at right now. This is where economists are looking at wage inflation and the effect that will have on people having to pay those extra tax and NI increases.
But basically, he's got a problem where the future is uncertain. Whether it is inflation, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's the return of a pandemic. So when we look at that headline in the Financial Times, he's basically saying, I'm going to have to keep something in reserve because things could get a whole lot worse.
Absolutely right. And that, I think, is something that's been criticised, and quite rightly, on many Western economies have been built on a debt-based model over the last few years. So the debt-based model is that the majority of businesses and private individuals use their income to service some form of debt, like a mortgage, or companies borrow and they use financing for things and they service debt, which means that hasn't borne in mind that there could potentially be something where some reserves need to be kept aside. It's very easy to break a bank when it's like that.
Yeah, and look, we're not asking you for political views because you come in
No,
as a
of course.
financial expert, but a lot of political commentators are suggesting that he's keeping the little war chest for the next election to try and help, look good just before people go
That's
to the
very
ballot
hard
box.
to
Look, I want to ask...
predict, really.
Yeah, and I won't press you on that, but on fuel duty, we're expecting this cut of around 5 pence per litre. Do you think that's going to go far enough? We only have to look to, say, Ireland. They're talking about, in Ireland, it's 17 pence per litre on petrol, 13 pence per litre on diesel.
Yeah.
And in France, it's 13 pence a litre for the next 4 months. We're only doing 5 pence. Why?
That's right. And it's already very expensive now. I mean, you can see there is no reduction of traffic on the roads because obviously people need to go about their everyday business. But there are a lot of dissenting voices. It's very expensive. The fuel for your car and the fuel to heat or cool your home or office is now a big talking point.
Yeah.
So these energy companies, Rishi Sunak was talking about making a windfall tax for energy companies profiteering on the back of this. But the difficulty with that is that it's almost gone down to a monopolistic situation where 30-something energy companies went out of the market at the end of last year, leaving it down to a few, which are also hit by supply chain and having to pay a lot for the raw commodities. Now, oil is up to almost $120 a barrel right now, which is really high, and other raw materials, because now, if you look at Europe, 40% of the raw materials base came from Russia, so you have now the sanctions which have left a hole in the market, so they've had to pay extra for that from other suppliers. So the question is, are those few energy companies left actually making any profit because they're having to pay a lot for the raw materials and the logistics in the first place? Or if they are making a profit, will they decide to move their registered office to the Cayman Islands or something like that and avoid that in the first place, which means that nobody actually makes anything from that revenue.
Yes.
I'm getting the impression that maybe nobody will be satisfied by, come 5 o'clock or so today.
That's possible. And actually, this tax with the fuel tax situation, if you've got 5p less, already I read a report yesterday that the government is talking about taking cars off the road on Sunday. I don't know if did you see that?
Yeah, saw that, yeah.
So they're talking about sort of lockdowns in a way, if you think about it, by removing vehicles on a Sunday. So even if you can pay for the fuel, you won't be allowed.
Nowhere to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
okay. Look, really appreciate that, Andrew. Always a fascinating
thank you.
insight, and have a good mini statement day, budget day, whatever it turns out to be.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Nice to
you
see you.
very much indeed. That was Andrew Sachs, Head of Research and Analysis at ETX Capital. Just want to say to you, if you're feeling the cold today or this fuel crisis or whatever, we want to get out and about and talk to as many of you as possible as what is important to you during this whole credit squeeze.
Yeah, we've got lots of viewers, haven't we, coming on today, so we're hoping to hear those views. And we want to know...
We would have had somebody...
We would have had one right now, but their line's
then,
gone down.
Yes.
Never mind.
People... technology, it's great when it works, when it doesn't.
But, what I'm interested in, and this is a sort of aside to all of this, but Rishi Sunak, everyone loved him, didn't they, during furlough? He was called Dishy Rishi. He was handing out the cash. He did help out to eat out to help out. He does all these very clever photo ops, doesn't he, with his cashmere hoodies. He's very optically aware. Will people start to go off him after today? That's the big question.
You had the cheek to talk. We had lunch with him 2 weeks ago, and she was all, Rishi this, Rishi
I didn't even speak to him. You sat on his
Did you
table.
not? Oh, you didn't want to speak to you. That's right, I forgot. You wanted to speak to me. Anyway, let's bring you up to date with the rest of the news. The time, 12 minutes past 6.
The Prime Minister has paid tribute to what he calls the heroic efforts of the NHS on the second anniversary of the first national lockdown. Boris Johnson also offered his sympathies to those bereaved by coronavirus, saying those who died will never be out of our hearts and minds.
Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have visited Bob Marley's home and met Jamaica's sporting greats as they visit the country for day 4 of their royal tour. It says protesters gathered at the British Embassy in Kingston with placards and accusations that the monarchy has benefited from blood, tears and sweat of slaves.
The Australian tennis number 1, Ash Barty, is to retire from the sport at the age of 25. The reigning Wimbledon and Australian Open champion says she's leaving tennis to chase other dreams.
A very multi-talented athlete, though, as well. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will get married today to his fiancée Stella Morris.
Yeah, the ceremony is to take place inside Belmarsh Prison in London, just weeks before the 3rd anniversary of his arrest, when he was removed from the Ecuadorian embassy in the capital.
Weather's warming up this week, which will be a welcome sight, but not to those who suffer from hay fever.
Experts are warning rising temperatures may cause tree pollen levels to spike across the UK. According to the Met Office, the coming week will see dry, sunny weather with daytime temperatures in the mid to late teens.
No, breakfast is always a big issue with us, and probably for you. Do you have a breakfast? A lot of people skip a breakfast, and they certainly don't sit down to a traditional big breakfast. So people's breakfast habits over the past 30 or so years have changed.
Yeah, when I think of my grandparents, they would have a fry-up every day. They'd have milk with the top up. Yeah, I mean, a very small one, but they'd have something fried every day, and they'd have cream at the top of their milk, and they lived to the ripe old age of 90. So that's what I've always thought. It's okay to do that. But fry-ups, they're on the way out. So how do you feel about an avocado on toast? If you came to mine for breakfast and I served up an avocado on toast, you wouldn't be very impressed.
I'd feel rather unfulfilled.
Really? It's very filling.
Not to me.
No.
Look, it's all right. It's as long as it wasn't on sourdough. Sourdough.
I love sourdough.
Why do you love sourdough?
It's sort of salty and savoury.
It doesn't taste like bread. Now, you see, real bread is like potato bread or soda bread that you should have in a fry-up. Well, I think a fry-up
What do you call them in Northern Ireland?
An Ulster fry.
An Ulster fry.
So you would have an Ulster fry. I mean, if you had one once a week, that would be marvellous.
Yeah, Sunday morning.
Yeah.
See, I had a fry-up on Sunday morning this weekend. It just disappointed me. I always think, the morning after the night before, it's something good to get you back on track. But it's always a disappointment. The sausages aren't quite charred to perfection the way I like it.
Beans don't belong in a fry.
Oh, really?
No. It's an English thing.
Oh, OK.
In Ireland, you don't have beans on your Ulster fry. But, crispy bacon, lovely. Fried eggs, poached eggs, very, very nice. Potato bread, soda bread, white pudding, black pudding.
Yeah.
You could do sausages, particularly
100%.
pork.
Yeah,
Do you like steak or pork?
Oh, definitely not steak with breakfast. My goodness, what do you take me for? But when it comes to avocado on toast, would you have smoked salmon with that, or would you have poached eggs? This is on chili. I'll have a little bit of chili on there.
I mean,
lemon.
it'd be quite nice as a brunch or something.
Yeah.
Probably.
There you go.
Matter of fact, I would take one right now because I'm starving. It has to be said. And there's never, the thing is, around here, there's never any shops that open until at least 7 o'clock. So
I might start packing you a breakfast.
Would you?
Yeah, just the once. See how that goes
Ruth
down.
used to
Pack
do
you some
that for me.
sourdough.
She'd do that. It's all full of
Maybe some fruit
muesli
juice. Yes, healthy things.
Anyway, 6:16
Oh, Ruthie, send them in with some food.
is the
man's
time.
starving.
Yes, let us know what you're having. Do you know what would be even better? Send us a picture of your
Send
food.
us a selfie of you watching or listening to GB News with your breakfast. That's a little challenge for the day.
At GB News, send those two. That's the Twitter address for that. 6:16 is the time.
Gosh, right. OK, we're going to turn our attention now to the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. It is, believe it or not, day 28, almost the first month anniversary of that. Russian troops now inside the city of Mariupol, which has been besieged for weeks and has been subject of barrages for day after day. This
comes amid new revelations from a senior American defense official, which suggests Russia's combat power is waning. Reports suggest heavy losses of personnel and weaponry on top of morale issues amid the stalled advance into Kyiv. Well, Mircea Babu is a freelance journalist and he's in Western Ukraine for us this morning. A very good morning to you. I know that you are somewhere safe and you're able to talk to us and you feel comfortable, but of course do let us know if you do need to go at any point during the interview, because I can see you're outside, which is slightly worrying to me. But look, just give us an update on where you feel things are going. I mean, the reports seem to be that the Ukrainian troops are doing well, that the Russians are struggling. But in some of the papers here, pointing to the Times newspaper, it says Ukrainian troops are running out of weapons.
Good morning. Indeed, I'm in a safe location. However, the alarms do go on every 10, 15 minutes or so. So if an alarm will go off, I will have to find shelter and kind of break away from this life. But for the moment, in the town I've been in the region I've been, which is close to the Romanian border, and Kiev that I visited in the last 48 hours several times, couple times actually, The civil defense units that I've seen are struggling to get weapons in terms of even basic weapons such as Kalashnikovs or small guns. So there is an issue with getting those weapons to the civil defense. Now, for the army itself, I can't really speak because I haven't really seen a lot of the army. They're mostly focused on the front line, which is obviously out of reach for security reasons for many journalists at the moment. But when you get close into Kiev and you talk to these civil defense units, which are basically civilians with arms, just to give you an example how much they're struggling at the moment to get weaponry and tactical gear in. Every time they stop us as journalists and they see our bulletproof vest, they're begging us to give it to them. And even some of them are offering money, which is a sign that they're not getting the equipment needed. And I've had friends, my translator is struggling to get bulletproof vests to his fellow friends, to his mates that are from the same school, same university they went to. They're fighting now on the front line. And he's saying none of them had bulletproof vests. None of them have the right equipment, from boots to trousers to anything. So to me, that is a sign that, yes, we've seen an improvement in the Ukrainian army in the last years in terms of NATO joint exercises. And we have these photo ops of them on the front line doing their best they can. But there is also this issue that you rightfully pointed of equipment and munition that is struggling to get particularly to the civil defense units.
Well, when you say struggling, one wonders, will it ever get there at all? Doesn't sound good the way you're describing things, Mercy. What can be done about this? Who can help? How can they help? Will it be solved?
Well, so President Zelensky did mention that he needs more support. He pointed out 2-3 weeks ago, if you remember, in a now famous quote saying, "Send munition, I don't need a plane," or something to that manner. Obviously, that happened, but it didn't happen to the point the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian civil defense units needed it because they're still struggling. I would say that Poland and Romania are the countries that Ukraine is looking at the moment in terms of this sort of military aid, if not coming from them directly, at least to allow transit of NATO military equipment to come into Ukraine. We've seen a lot of humanitarian help in both countries, including Hungary. So all the neighboring countries, obviously south and west of Ukraine, are helping out. But in terms of that, equipment is still struggling to get in or to be visible on the front line in the cities that are being defended at the moment.
Merchant, nobody knows what the future holds for Ukraine. Of course, the short-term worries are significant, but there are also concerns about the long-term. The use of landmines, we're being told, could be a huge problem in the country for decades to come.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is one of the most dangerous things at the moment. Yesterday, when I was driving into Kiev, I passed through a field that was clearly marked as landmines. And I spoke with farmers on the outside of Kiev, saying we can no longer go and work our fields. We don't feel safe enough, because even if some of them are clearly marked, we don't know for sure. And yesterday night, I was passing back from the Moldovan to the Ukrainian border. I just went into Moldova briefly for a couple hours just to check on the situation at the border. Coming back, I was speaking with the Moldovan border guards, who were telling me that the Ukrainians have mined the areas around the borders without letting them know. Obviously, this is an unconfirmed information. I have to double check that. But I have no reason to doubt that they were worried, because they were clearly showing signs of deep worry about what's going on at their border, what's happening with the Ukrainian side in terms of mining places where a lot of civilians have crossed in the last 3 weeks. Do remember that a lot of the refugees obviously cross through official border points, but some of them, men that don't want to fight and they're not allowed to leave the country, but they are entitled to ask for asylum, do cross the border illegally. So what's going to happen? There's a high risk of these mines placed in different places to end up hurting Ukrainian civilians, such as farmers in the field or people fleeing the war through unofficial border points, checkpoints.
Merci, we've got to leave it there. You stay safe and look forward to talking to you again. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
When you look at all the things that we worry about and our big problems,
I know.
but and you look at those scenes and what people are facing there. And
Scrambling for bulletproof vests. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Right, 24 minutes past. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll take a look at what the cost of living crisis means for brewing, as in British brewing, as in pints and the rest, after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan Mcfadden. A cracking start out there. Once again, chilly at first, but with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will rise. And again, it's going to feel warm this afternoon, much warmer than you'd expect for the time of year. High pressure sitting to the east. We've again got this gentle southerly airflow. That's bringing predominantly cloud-free skies, but it's also bringing some warmth with it. Now, for the start of the day, a few fog patches, primarily across northeast England, but they lift in the next few hours. And then, for the vast majority, it's blue skies and sunshine for the rest of the day. Outside chance of a shower, for example, the north of Scotland, perhaps the east of England later on. Really the exception here rather than the rule. For the vast majority, it's blue skies, it's dry and it's warm. 15 to 18 Celsius widely, could get 19 or 20 degrees somewhere like London, Cambridge, Manchester or the far north of Scotland. Into the evening and skies remain clear. I think we'll see a bit more of a breeze there for Cornwall at times through the day. A bit of patchy cloud as well. But thicker cloud arrives into western Scotland, the far north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, perhaps to bring a few light showers by the end of the night. Otherwise, it's clear skies as we wake up on Thursday and another fresh start. A few fog patches, but the sun soon gets to work, lifting those temperatures, lifting the fog. And again, barely a cloud in the sky for parts of eastern Scotland into much of England and Wales. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing those thicker clouds at times through the afternoon and seeing some spots of rain around western coasts and hills. But for the vast majority, it's dry and it's warm again, 15 to 17 Celsius generally. Now, similar weather conditions are expected on Friday and Saturday, so that means widespread sunny skies. But for the north and west of Scotland, for Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud at times and feeling cooler here.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Lots more coming up in the Breakfast Show this morning, including the search for survivors. It's continuing after a Boeing 737 plane carrying 132 people crashed in southern China. We'll have all the latest on that. The search for the black box is continuing.
And world tennis #1, Ashley Barty, has announced her retirement at just 25 years of age. Paul Coit will join us to run through this and the other top sports stories.
We should also say, a little bit later on in the programme, we're going to be speaking to the author, Robert Hardman.
I thought we were going to speak to the Queen.
Well, yeah.
Not the way you held that up.
Sorry, no, the author of his new biography of the Queen, Queen of Our Times, The Life of Elizabeth II. It's been heavily covered in the newspapers, and we've got the man himself coming in just after 9 o'clock. He'll be really interesting.
He's a top royal biographer, and really, I suppose he describes Queen Elizabeth as the gold standard of royals and monarchy. So some interesting stuff there, some stories never told before, and he'll be telling them to us after 9 o'clock. Well, the boss of a brewery in Derby is warning that many businesses like his won't be here tomorrow without the Chancellor's help.
Like most sectors, the beer and pub industry is being pushed to the limit by spiralling costs.
Later today, the Chancellor will deliver his spring statement. As you know, many people hope he will outline a plan to soften the cost of living crisis, but is drinking beer part of that? Let's find out. Here's our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis.
For 2 decades, the team at the Derby Brewing Company have perfected their craft. But nowadays, every beer they brew becomes more expensive. The rising prices of energy and ingredients are squeezing the small business. Andy is in charge of the brewing team.
We've just done new contracts with our main suppliers of malt and hops, and the price increases is there to be seen. We're just going to have to be creative in how the beers that we do going forward.
Pubs and breweries endured colossal pain through the pandemic. Thanks to furlough and other schemes, many survived, but they still aren't safe. The cost of living crisis is a mammoth challenge, according to the brewery's boss, Paul.
At this time of year, we do, as a standard, get increases from our suppliers, but they're 4 or 5 times what we would normally expect. Energy prices are absolutely soaring. You have other costs that kind of kick in at this time of year. So, living wage increases. We have also, because of the pandemic, a lot of the loans are kicking back in, certainly for ourselves and other businesses.
Later, the Chancellor will deliver his spring statement. Many hope for a cut in fuel duty and for an extension to the reduced VAT, but that might not be enough. Ian, from the Forum of British Pubs, says too little support will be deadly for the industry.
I think one of the things he may well do is affect fuel duty, but it's a bit, as you and I discussed, the fuel duty will benefit the producers, not necessarily the end users. Will that get passed down? One thing that did help was the reduction in VAT on food. And I do think they could look at VAT both on food and alcohol for the pub sector, because that would be, on the sales that they make, that would be a benefit directly to the publicans.
Back in Derby, there's no rush to brew this batch. The process takes time. But for many businesses, that is something that is running out.
We need help now. No businesses can sustain a constant increase of cost base. It's frankly unsustainable. And we and many other businesses won't be here tomorrow if the costs just continue to rack up.
Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Look, we focused on brewing there. It could be anything. Your business. Maybe we don't talk about your business, and you're often unheralded. But let us know if there's a particular, whether you're a bakery, whether you're a motor mechanic, whatever, at GB News. Let us know what help you need, why people don't talk about your business, and how worse off we would be without your business, whatever it is.
Yeah, do let us know. We really want to hear those stories. Look, coming up after the break, we're going to be taking a look at the papers today. We're joined by our very own Liam Halligan. He's, of course, our news and economics and business editor and, of course, the presenter of On the Money. And he's joined today by the Conservative Home columnist, Emily Carver. We'll see you in a sec.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
25 to 7 is the time. Front pages look like this on this Wednesday morning, beginning with The Telegraph.
It says Ukrainian forces have retaken several strategically significant areas in their country from Russian forces, provoking fears that a desperate Putin may now be turning to chemical weapons.
Times leads on the news that Ukrainian troops may be running out of armament.
The Mirror leading with an emotive appeal from a mother of 4 struggling to cope with the cost of living crisis, calling on the Chancellor to help poorer families.
The Mail says the Chancellor should roll back what they call the worst time tax rise in history ahead of the spring statement this afternoon. That's the national insurance rise.
The Sun going with a different exclusive today. They have photos from inside Vladimir Putin's super yacht showing off a gold-plated toilet roll holder.
Daily Star covers the alleged discrimination that Cockneys face when trying to gain employment. Does an accent count? Let us know if you think your accent goes against you or not.
I do love that phrase.
There are many people who mock my accent. Mock and do impersonations.
You mock my accent all the time, FYI. Were you not talking about me? Yeah.
Say no.
No.
No, that's how I say no. How would you say no?
Now.
Well, so you're putting that on.
I'm not. Now. How would you think I'd say now?
Now. You have a very estuary. You have that Cockney accent at times.
You're having a giraffe, aren't you?
Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah. Let's go through the papers. Yes. We're in the company of Liam Hannigan, who's our economics and business editor. He's on the money every day at 1 o'clock. And Emily Carver, who's a columnist at Conservative Home.
Yes, and you've started, Liam, with this story from The Express. Rishi Sunak pledging to ease economic pain. Is that what he's going to do today?
Well, as you said earlier, Isabel, Rishi really was flavour of the month. He was dishy Rishi, wasn't he, during the pandemic, handing out all that cash for furlough, business support schemes and so on. But having spent £400 billion during the pandemic on those anti-COVID support measures, cash is now tight. So what the Chancellor's trying to do is position himself to say, I know the cost of living squeeze is there. We've been talking about it for months on GB News. It's made much worse by the war. Fuel bills, food bills, and so on. And he wants to say, I'm putting my arm around more vulnerable households. I'll stand by you, the Chancellor's been saying in recent days. But it is going to be really tough. We talked about that national insurance rise. Let's just put that in context, what that is. If you're a basic rate taxpayer, that national insurance rise alone is going to cost you 178 quid a year. And if you're a higher rate taxpayer and more people are getting dragged into that higher rate tax bracket, you know, not particularly senior teachers, police officers are getting into that higher rate tax bracket, that national insurance rise alone is going to cost you £715 a year.
Wow.
That's a holiday.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to make up. And Emily, the thing is, though, it's the great unknown for the Chancellor, isn't it? It's this whole balancing the books and not knowing what's around the corner in terms of pandemic, in terms of Ukraine, in terms of inflation.
Yeah, that's true. And I think Sunak will certainly talk about that in his statement today, how the aspiration is to balance the books. But, I mean, there have been reports and analysis done this week about how he potentially does have billions in terms of wiggle room. He does have the money there because of tax revenues and so on.
But what would you like that money, where would you like that money to go, to be seen to be done with that money?
Well, I think it should be used to scrap these unnecessary tax hikes. National insurance, essentially a tax on jobs. This isn't the time to be doing it. He's going to be talking about security. He's going to be talking about security for people at home.
Let me say to you, is this the time we always say, fix the social care system, fix the NHS? That seems to be what people want. Then when it comes to actually doing it and paying for it, nobody wants to do it. Are you saying the aspiration is wrong or the timing is wrong for this?
I think the aspiration in some ways is wrong. I think public spending has spiralled out of all control. We saw how much money was spent over the course of the pandemic. We need to claw back from that. We can't be spending at emergency levels for much longer. And of course, the Chancellor always has different groups, different departments essentially begging for money, but he's going to have to say, actually, we need to go for growth. We need to prioritise not taxing our population so highly, and then we can get higher tax revenues in the future.
It's interesting you chose this front page for the Mail, which is talking about him as a high-tax Chancellor. And Eamonn was talking a little bit earlier about a lunch we went to 2 weeks ago when he was actually talking about his children. He was joking that their Conservative instincts hadn't yet kicked in. But for a lot of people, the Chancellor's Conservative instincts haven't yet kicked in, have they? Because he's just raising taxes.
Well, yes. I mean, he talks a good game when it comes to lowering taxes. He says that's the aspiration. He says that this spring statement will lead us on that path to lowering taxes. But we haven't seen any of that. I mean, of course, we've had a pandemic where he's had to splurge, but he needs to get back to lowering taxes. That's what Conservative voters want. That's why people put him in office. So he needs to show more than just, saying he's going to do it.
OK.
Should we look at the Mirror, Liam? Because the other thing, I suppose, a problem for him is he is married to a billionaire. He's incredibly privileged in his own right. Is he a bit detached from the realities that the Mirror is trying to remind him about? Broke families.
I think there's a danger that he comes across as that, those sort of natty photos of him in his, £100 sliders and 1,500 quid cashmere jumpers. It's not a good look at a time when so many people are suffering. I think they were ill-advised. And Emily's right. There are a lot of people on the Tory backbenches, even people on the Labour front bench, that are saying he can afford not to go through with this tax rise. He would say that, yes, but inflation's going up, that generates some extra tax revenues, but that means everything the state buys is more expensive. The state employs 5.7 million people. They need a pay rise because there's inflation. The state buys lots of fuel, so there are lots of costs associated with inflation as well. And this is the political conundrum. And meanwhile, as you say, as the Mirror does a good job of reporting on various members of society, you've got Matt, who's 30. He's a staff nurse in Merthyr Tydfil. My NHS pay has been falling in real terms, that's after inflation, since 2010, he says. And petrol's £1.79 a litre. I can't afford to fill my car. There's a granny, self-styled Valerie in Coventry. She's in tears because her 400 quid a month she receives in benefits, not enough money for food. And Michelle, who's 51 in Cottingham, that's in Yorkshire, her business has been whacked during the pandemic, her beauty salon. And a big number in this budget that I'll be looking for is the extent to which benefits are going to be uprated by. Traditionally, benefits are uprated by the rate of inflation the previous September. That was only 3.1%, that rate of inflation in September. We're already at 5, 6, 7, 8% inflation. can he afford to not uprate benefits? Can he afford that headline? I'd say not.
Pensions into that as well. Same problem.
Yeah. Indeed, we haven't been talking much about pensioners during this cost of living crisis, but there's the whole question over the triple lock, and Tory chancellors always remember it's pensioners who turn out when it comes to vote.
Sure.
I would just say on the cost of living, you know, the Chancellor should be thinking about this more than, you know, just raising welfare payments. We have to look at how the government is pushing up that cost of living. And that means looking at...
In what way?
Well, through all the taxes that they inflict on us, which obviously those at the poorer end of the scale, it's more of their income that's used for those taxes. So looking at VAT,
it's not even talking
at
to the people who are being persecuted for retrospective taxes as well, which is a whole other thing. I feel sorry. I mean, you feel sorry for everyone, people on benefits and whatever. And this woman who's featured in the Mirror story today, she's a mum of 4 there. She's taken on a second job. She's still, people who just... They work every hour of the day. They come home to look after their family as well, but they have to support their family, and they're just seeming to be going nowhere. I mean, all of this isn't necessarily the Chancellor's fault, but he can do something about it, and that's what you're saying, Emily, really.
Yeah, he has to. He has to reduce the cost of living in some way. Of course, he doesn't have all the power in the world, but there are things he can do.
OK. Now, this is a disgusting story in the front of the Sun. No, it's disgusting. It's disgusting.
No, I'm only chuckling because it's about his toilet, but... Carry on.
Yeah, but it's about Putin's yacht, which I believe they should allow him to keep, allow him to take a holiday on it, and then blast it with missiles while he's on board, because then at least you know where he is, or a submarine or something. As Mad Vlad bombs women and children, we expose his floating palace, Emily, complete with obscenely bling loo roll holder.
Yes, I mean, we've just been talking about the cost of living in this country, which Putin has had a hand in driving up, thanks to his energy policy. And this is a picture, well, there's a 2-page spread in The Sun today showing just how garish, expensive and pricey his £500 million super yacht is. And apparently there's pressures on Italy to seize this, because that's where it's harboured at the moment. And potentially use the money to home Ukrainians or give to charity.
The thing about him is he doesn't look a bundle of fun, Liam, does he? He doesn't look as if... I mean, he's got a dance floor, he's got a pool...
There's a hospital.
What?
On board.
Oh, because he's a hypochondriac of the highest order, isn't he?
So, but he has a pool that the floor comes over the top and becomes a dance floor. 2 helipads, a judo gym. He's got a black belt, of course. He's got a massive fish tank, a 5-metre fish tank. I mean, it goes on and on. But I mean, he looks miserable. He just looks miserable anyway. And you see the plush, lush, indecent interiors of all of this.
A big part of this, now a full-on economic war between Russia and the West, which is what it is. It's not a military conflict between Russia and the West. I don't think we'll get to that point. But it's a full-on economic war. A big part of that isn't just sanctions and counter-sanctions on energy and other exports, which, as Emily rightly says, is putting rocket boosters under this cost of living crisis. It's also the danger now of requisitioning each other's property. I mean, it's a great story by The Sun. It's dyed-in-the-wool tabloid journalism, but I would just caution that there are a lot more Western assets in Russia than there are Russian assets in the West. We have some of our leading companies, the likes of VW, Siemens, Samsung, BP, Shell, have enormous bolted-to-the-ground assets in Russia. And if we get into a situation where we are basically taking each other's assets in each other's countries, if it does get to that, it's not there yet, but if it does get to that, then it's going to take much, much, much longer to return to any kind of diplomatic normality.
Look, we do talk about this being Putin's war and not the Russian people's war, but still, I mean, things that annoy me. FA Cup matches last weekend were screened in Russia. And if you're going to make things seem abnormal, these have got to be taken away. The FA's got to do something, or whoever holds the rights to these sort of things. Normality, it's got to be a wake-up call. When we look at what's happening in Mariupol, we look at what's happening in Kyiv, just horrendous. And there's got to be, this man is doing this in your name.
Yes, no, I agree. I'd also agree with Liam that we need to be careful about upholding our own rule of law in Europe when it comes to the populist demands to seize, oligarchs' properties. I mean, there is the concern that could lead to, you know, anyone with a Russian-sounding name being up for scrutiny, which we don't want in this country, and we certainly don't want to become more like Putin's Russia, where they do just seize whatever they wish to.
Again, I'm going to say it again, Liam. Chelsea Football Club, I don't wish any harm against Chelsea Football Club. But Abramovich, why is he being allowed to sell this for nearly £3 billion? Take the money and run. Why is he being allowed to get the money for it?
Yeah, it's a very difficult moral, financial, economic, diplomatic conundrum, Eamonn. I completely agree with you. I guess the argument would run that if we do just requisition property from private individuals without due process, without a court of law, whatever we think about what they've done, whatever our impressions of them, whatever the diplomatic pressure, whatever the moral outrage, rightly, about war, then we are as bad as they are. You have to have some kind of due process. You have to have some kind of legal structure, because if you don't, you just have anarchy. And in the end, geography always wins. Russia is there. It's 11 time zones. It's got a lot of commodities. It's got 150 million people. The difference between now and the Cold War is that, you know, a high number of those 150 million people travel in the West, have connections in the West. There isn't the Iron Curtain of people that there used to be, not least with social media and mass travel. That's going to continue. And so we do have to look forward to the day, hopefully soon, when we can start to rebuild relations.
The day when Putin's gone.
Yes, well, exactly.
OK, guys, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Liam and Emily will be back in about 50 minutes' time. Right now, it's coming up to 10 minutes to 7.
Well, as we've been talking about British households facing a cost of living crisis with inflation hitting its highest level in 30 years, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has been speaking to one small business owner in Hull ahead of the Chancellor's spring statement. Let's find out what they had to say.
Glenn Davidson has been running the crepe company for the last 10 years, catering across the UK at weddings, corporate events, festivals and private parties. During the pandemic, with countless events being cancelled, Glenn's business suffered, and he's now just getting back on his feet after 2 years of uncertainty. The chef appreciated the government grants, but now with the cost of living crisis being worsened by the Ukraine war, this is what Glenn would like to see in the spring budget.
Well, it's a tough one with the budget because, as we're all aware, with the problem with Russia and Ukraine and whatnot, and gas is going up, and I'm aware that, you know, when the gas goes up, that all the trucks that deliver our food, everything's got to go up in price, and then we buy it and we've got to put our prices up. So it's difficult for me to say, well, knock a bit of money off this and knock a bit of money off that. So I think the only way that for a small business like mine would be to not take as much money off me, you know. So when it comes to income tax, you know, let's be kind, and also interest rates, and we all have mortgages and people have business loans. So, you know, can we you know, knock them down a little bit and, you know, help us in the pocket that way.
For now, Glenn is staying positive for the future and feels lucky to still be in business.
A lot of businesses have gone under, and you know, I really do feel for them. You know, I'm a survivor, you know, and you know, I tend to you know, give it some big sessions at these jobs that I do, and hopefully do well. But yeah, it's really bad when you see businesses that put the whole life into it and it goes under. But I'm positive, you know, I'm positive things are going to get back to normal again.
For now, Glenn and other business owners will just have to wait and see what Rishi Sunak delivers in the spring budget. Anna Riley, GB News, Hull.
We're going to talk now about this airline crash in China. And the search for survivors continues. Highly unlikely there will be any, the way this plane carried 132 people on board. Chinese aircraft crashed into hills the south of the country, failing to reach its destination on Monday afternoon. OK, so here to help us understand what went wrong, John Strickland. John is an aviation consultant, strategist and industry analyst. John, the big scary thing about this, of course, is that it is a Boeing 737 involved in this, and there's a bit of history. What are the theories at the moment?
Well, just to give a bit more background about Eamonn, it is a 737, but it's called a 737-800. Now, this is not the 737 MAX, which was the type of aircraft that was grounded after 2 tragic crashes in its history. This one is a model of which there are several thousand flying around the world. It's had a really excellent safety record. It's widely used here in Europe. Many viewers would have flown on it. Ryanair's whole fleet is using this aircraft. They've got over 400. We have Jet2 and TUI. And as I said, it's had a really good safety record. The 737 MAX, which is a newer version with different technology, has now gone through over 2 years of examination. And it's just in the process of getting back into service. It already is flying in a number of countries. China was in the process of recertifying it, and at the moment we have to wait and see if they'll still do that after this accident. Now, turning to your question about theories, it's far too early to actually tell what happened. We know, of course, the aircraft was pretty well at cruising altitude. It was a high altitude of 29,000 feet, and then fell dramatically, it would seem, almost vertically down to the crash site. Normally, the cruising part of the flight is the most routine and straightforward. It's not at all typical that something would happen in that phase of flight, but whatever did happen, we have to wait until we get data. It's important that the experts can get hold of what are called the black boxes. One of those is actually the flight data recorder. It captures every bit of information about the aircraft and its systems up to the point of the aircraft's loss, and the cockpit voice recorder as well. Now, these boxes are very durable, made to withstand impact, but of course, as you said, it's in a mountainous area, very difficult terrain, forested as well, and quite remote. So actually to find those is going to be important. And then they take quite some time to actually analyse.
Assuming they find the black box, that is. If they don't, I mean, this is going to be an investigation by the Chinese aviation authorities, but because it's an American airliner in terms of Boeing, they're allowed to have some American input into that investigation, aren't they? Will that perhaps give us a different take on all of this?
That's right. Wherever an accident happens, it's always the country of the accident, but it's the lead authority. So you're quite correct in saying it's the Chinese who lead it. They will also have representatives from the airline, in this case China Eastern, and ordinarily wherever an accident happened in the world would also be the manufacturer. So again, in this case Boeing, and indeed the engine manufacturer as well. But they don't get any right of lobbying or anything of that kind. They're there to provide the technical expertise based on the fact that the aircraft is manufactured by their company.
But Boeing's name is mud after the MAX air crashes as well, because it did come to light about lack of safety checks, cost cutting, and their whole standards all driven towards profit. They've not come out of this well. The reputation's not good. There's got to be questions asked about the line of descent from the airplane when it fell from the sky. I saw pictures in the papers yesterday which showed that it was nose diving basically into the ground. I know, as you say, all the data, John, has to be gathered. But your view about boarding a Boeing, if you had the choice to or not to, would be what?
I would. I just travelled on a 737-800 about 3 weeks ago myself, admittedly before this particular accident, but I would feel confident to do so. And the version that did have the two tragic accidents and raised a lot of issues, as you say, about the whole ethos of safety and culture in Boeing, which they've been, not surprisingly, severely wrapped for worldwide. They had this aircraft grounding, there have been management changes, and the company has still got to work its way through this to restore what was a gleaming reputation in the past. I think they've made substantial progress on those aircraft. As I said, in most countries, the MAX are flying again, but certainly there's no room for them to in any way slip back into complacency about that need to always put safety before any other commercial consideration, and particularly here in China, because China's a big market for Boeing. Aircraft like the one that crashed have been sold in large numbers to China. Boeing hopes to sell aircraft of many types in its portfolio to China in the future, and China itself is known as having very scrupulous safety regulation, so they're not going to tolerate any inputs from a company that's driven by commercial consideration, and Boeing has to make sure that it comes out of this again as a company that indeed takes safety seriously.
Okay, I mean, it's not just Boeing. I mean, we could be involving pilot error and all sorts of things in this. as well. And there are a lot of factors to take into consideration. The main thing is it's a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that obviously we don't want to repeat. John Strickland, really appreciate your take, and I know it's very sensitive and it's very early days to start talking and speculating about these things, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If they find that black box, do come back and talk to us. That would be great. Thank you. Stay with us. Lots more coming up on the programme. We'll be talking, of course, about the Chancellor's spring statement and what this is crucially going to mean for you. That's after this short break. See you in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak delivers his spring statement today, but will it help those who need it most?
A very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock on this Wednesday, the 23rd of March. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster. Good morning.
We are live across your TV, your radio and online, and this is what's leading the news this morning.
The Chancellor will present his spring statement today to the House of Commons. We'll find out how his decisions will affect the pound in your pocket.
And we'll hear from small businesses, breweries and you, the GB News viewers, about the cost of living and what the government needs to do to help those most in need. We'll also be hearing from the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat Mcfadden, on what he'd like to see from the announcement.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russian forces have entered the city of Mariupol after 2 massive explosions. One human rights organisation described it as a freezing hellscape, riddled with dead bodies and destroyed buildings.
And jailed for a further 9 years, a judge finds the Putin critic Alexei Navalny guilty of fraud and contempt. We'll speak to his former aide as supporters brand the case a sham.
OK, don't forget, of course, you can join in any of our discussions, particularly relevant today, as with this spring statement, how it would affect you, how you would need help from it, what do you need to ease the cost of living crisis as regards you, and who are you worried about? You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews.
OK, our top story this morning. The Chancellor is to deliver his much-anticipated spring statement to the House of Commons today.
Originally intended to be an economic update, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis has transformed what he will say today into a key moment.
Well, skyrocketing energy bills and inflation have meant that many families and small businesses are now struggling to make ends meet and are appealing to the government for relief.
The Chancellor's tipped to make security the focus of his speech today, not just in the form of weapons and aid to Ukraine, but also the security of public finances and a faster growing economy.
He will reportedly vow to stand by hard-working families and help with the escalating cost of living crisis. Many are hoping for a cut to fuel duty and a delay to the rise in national insurance.
But after his unprecedented financial support for many during the pandemic, there are questions over how far he will go in this statement, despite pressure to spend and borrow more.
Well, in his autumn budget last year, he made clear that his intention going forward would be to balance the books and to cut taxes in the future.
But his tenure as Chancellor so far has been defined by massive spending and taxes at the highest level for 70 years.
Well, founder at Frank Investments is Paul Sedgwick, and he joins us in the studio this morning. Very good morning to you. It's going to be an interesting day for you.
I think it will be, yeah.
What are you looking for? What are you particularly concerned about?
Well, I think that as everybody is concerned about rising prices, higher taxation, higher interest rates, this is not generally a particularly good mixture for economic growth. So I think how Rishi Sunak deals with those impacts on the economy will be interesting. I mean, I think if we want to give him a little bit of slack, you could argue that he's had to deal with in the last 2 years some pretty unprecedented circumstances, a global pandemic. We've now got the war between Russia and Ukraine. So he's had a difficult time to work with. But obviously, they've spent a great deal of money. The Bank of England supporting the economy over the last couple of years. And I think that he will be reluctant to see the economy retrace quickly. So I think there'll be a balance of trying to ensure that he supports families that need the support, ensure that he doesn't do too much to damage the economy, and maintain some form of growth.
His main problem, of course, is he just doesn't know what's going to happen next. It's the great unknown, isn't it? You've got a war, you've got a pandemic, you've got rising inflation. Where's he going to be hit from next?
Well, that's probably what he's thinking about, but maybe he's hoping that things will start to settle down a bit. But I think that what is worth bearing in mind is that over the past 2 or 3 years, we've had a great deal of support from central banks, the Bank of England, the Fed, the ECB, helping support the global economy through this period of time. And we have seen, as we know in the UK and across the world, a higher taxation, a higher fiscal burden. I think that balance will change in the.
Do you? In what way?
Well, I think that today you probably won't see a great deal of tax changes. You may see a little bit of a cut in fuel duty. You may see some raising of the threshold for to offset the national.
But all these little bits, people will say, well, that's not going to make a darn bit of difference to me. The thing is, he has to believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that we can take pain. We think we're hurting at the moment, but he's prepared to turn the screw or let us hurt a little bit more, maybe a lot more.
Well, I don't know whether he's going to hurt us a lot more. I think what the trend will be, my opinion is that the trend will be for an easing of the fiscal burden in the coming years. This will be the start. This may be a small start, but he is aware of the fact that my view is that as time passes, up towards the general election, we've all seen the headlines about how the fiscal burden is higher than it has been for generations, that will ease over the coming...
As we approach a new election. Spooky enough. And on that, Paul, I want to go to Sue Ashcombe-Hurt. Sue's a viewer of this programme. We've had her on before. Sue, lovely to see you again.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel.
Good morning.
I'm worried about you, Sue. You don't look too happy, and we're talking about, how this cost of living crisis is hurting people. We talked to you before about how you get up during the day, you put your cardigan on, you're careful with your heat and things. And we have Paul here in the studio, who's a financial analyst. We're trying to predict what the Chancellor is going to do. How much are you hurting? We're saying that he's prepared to ease the pressure on all of us a little bit, but do you need more than a little bit?
Well, I think everybody needs more than a little bit. I think, this fuel business is frightening most, especially pensioners. It must be frightening the life out of most of us. I spent all my life in finance, so I've been preparing for it since it was sort of mentioned that it's going up. Last month, I managed to get by on just under £65 worth of energy all month, which, did mean a lot of sacrifices. But then I'm trying to build up a balance to cushion me against the worst after April. And I think that's the most important thing. I think we really ought to start getting fracking, because I think the CEO of Quadrilla said that he could get gas out of the earth within 3 months. And at the end of that, we could actually be sending gas to Europe, which as a Brexiteer would be wonderful for me. And also these tax rises, there's no need for them. If the government spent their money as well as I spend mine, then we wouldn't have to do it.
So you say there's no need for these tax rises, this national insurance, but that could be specifically for you. That could be for social care. That could be for NHS. And the older you get, the more reliant you will be on that. And you would want a pretty good system in place to take care of you, would you not?
Yeah, but they have enough money already. If you look at just welfare, they lose £40 billion a year on welfare alone. And the furlough scheme, they just handed money out without doing any checks. How long would it have taken to check with the company's house how long a business had been running for, and with their own systems on whether that company had been paying national insurance and income tax into the treasury? That would have taken me 20 minutes at the maximum. And yet they didn't do checks. They just handed money out right, left and centre. And that's why this country ends up, the magic money tree for any government is us, the taxpayer. It really makes me angry.
Yeah, and Sue, look, you talk about being a Brexiteer. I don't know if you're a Conservative. People talk about Rishi Sunak as being dishy Rishi. You sound like you're a bit disappointed in him already. Do you think you might be more disappointed by him today?
Yeah. I'm a true blue Conservative with principles. And if this national insurance goes ahead, I've been working up until now. If this national insurance rise goes ahead for pensioners, then I'm afraid I'm going to stop working. So not only will he not get the money off me for national insurance, then he won't get any extra income tax off me either. So it'll be detrimental to a lot of pensioners.
I'm going to put that to a financial analyst who's been listening to a lot of what you had to say. She's right in a way.
I tell you, Sue, you make a lot of very good points. I think the first one that you made, which is right, is I think we will see an increase in fracking, and I think we will, now that prices of around $100 a barrel make it much more economic. I think that you're absolutely right. You don't necessarily see higher revenues from higher taxation. I mean, if you take, for example, corporation tax have fallen over the last 10 years. I know the economy's grown, so some people will argue that that's part of it, but you've actually seen corporation tax revenues rise over the last 10 years. And you've seen in other parts of the world, when taxes are actually cut, revenues rise, because obviously there is a greater incentive to growth. Mm-hmm. So, Sue, you make some very good points there, and I think that they're definitely, and I think this is a very tricky balance that Rishi Sunak is trying to find here.
OK, do you want to come back to that, Sue? Any more thoughts that you want to share with us about the statement today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want Rishi to be an actual Tory and not a Labour Chancellor, because that's what he's been doing. And I think, they ought to do more about the fraud that goes on. And I spend my money very carefully, and I spend it a lot better than he does if he let me keep more of it.
Yeah. Well, listen, could you tell me, you said something there. You said you got your heating bills down to 65 quid in a month. That's some going. Could you just explain to people, could you tell us a story of how you actually do that?
Well, as I say, I switch the heating on perhaps once a week to keep the house warm for 3 hours. And that heats me water up as well. And I spend most of my time in the house with two cardigans on usually, and I've got my fleece to watch the TV on. I only have, as I said before, I only have one hot meal a day. The rest of the time, I drink warm drinks and sandwiches, basically. And, you know, I just don't use hot water so much and stuff like that. Just anything that uses energy. I do my washing once a week or once a fortnight if I can. Anything that uses heat or electricity, I don't use if I can help it.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating hearing your story. And Sue's a woman who works. She works as well. And that's the way she's cutting down on things. Always appreciate your time and talking to you.
Lovely to see you.
Hi, Sue.
And by the way, Eamonn, I love the way you say my name.
Why do I say it differently?
No, it's your accent at the end when you say hurt.
Hurt.
Okay. Bye, Sue. Thanks very much indeed from Wimslow in Cheshire. There, thank you very much.
So many views coming in, absolutely flooded with them this morning. Gary makes a really good point. He says, no matter how much the Chancellor reduces the amount of petrol duty, are we confident the petrol companies will pass it on? I'm not, he says. Archie says, I hope something's done for people like me on universal credit. I've been using a food bank. I was expecting a delivery yesterday. I had to go to the doctor. I left a note, but when I got home, nothing was there. The result is no food. Don't get my universal credit till Monday. No idea what I'm going to do until then.
Scary.
In a difficult situation.
Paul, thanks for your take on things. Maybe talk to you again later in the week. Thank you very much.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you. That's financial analyst Paul Sedgwick there. The latest headlines for the time, it's 7:14.
In the last few minutes, official figures show the inflation rate in February rose to 6.2%. That is up from 5.5% in January. That's according to, as I was saying, the Office for National Statistics. We'll have more on that breaking news in around half an hour when we're joined again for the paper review with Liam Halligan.
The United States and its allies are considering whether to remove Russia from the G20 group following its actions in Ukraine. But the measure is likely to be vetoed by other members such as China, India and Saudi Arabia. Instead, it's thought some countries may boycott the actual meeting.
The Prime Minister has been paying tribute to what he calls the heroic efforts of NHS staff on the second anniversary of the first national lockdown. Boris Johnson also offered his sympathies to those bereaved by coronavirus, saying those who died will never be out of our hearts and minds.
Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have visited Bob Marley's home and met Jamaica's sporting greats as they visit the country for day 4 off their royal tour. It's as protesters gathered at the British Embassy in Kingston with placards and accusations that the monarchy has benefited from what they say is blood, tears and sweat of slaves.
And the weather is warming up this week. It'll be a welcome sight to some, but of course there are concerns for those who suffer from hay fever. Experts are saying the rising temperatures could cause tree pollen levels to spike across the UK. But according to the Met Office, the coming week will see dry, sunny weather with daytime temperatures in the mid to late teens. Right, 7:15. Let us know what you're having for breakfast this morning. We're having a big discussion about whether or not fry-ups are becoming a thing of the past. Would it be a sad thing if that happened? I wouldn't really miss them, I don't think.
I think it's the effort involved in doing it, the cooking, the cleaning, the washing up business and all that sort of thing as well. So the traditional fry-up apparently is toast.
Yeah.
Not that it is toast.
Smashed avo on toast.
It's gone.
Oh, I see.
Yes, yeah, it's toast.
Yeah, so now everywhere you go, and it is true, every coffee shop or wherever you go, everyone's eating smashed avo on toast with some chilli. It is the thing these days, and you don't really see many people eating fry-ups, greasy spoons. If you're in one, let us know. How's it going? How's business going in a greasy spoon? It seems as though avocados are taking over the world, doesn't it?
I like egg in a cup.
Egg in a cup.
Soft-boiled egg.
Oh, dippy egg.
Yeah. So it's more than you get in an egg cup, more than one egg, which is hardly worth. By the time you dip a bit of toast in that, it's gone. But if you get 3 or 4 in a cup, mixed up, with some butter in there as well.
3 or 4 eggs?
Yes.
Mixed in a cup?
3 or 4 eggs.
Crikey.
Yes.
So what, you'd soft boil them and then you pour them all into a cup?
Yeah.
This is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing.
Pepper, you add salt.
It has to be very salty.
Bit of butter in there as well.
But then you don't have all the fun of sort of scraping it out with your toast and...
You do.
Oh. Is this your own recipe or is this a thing?
This is a big thing. As I grew up in Ireland, that's the way lots of people have their breakfast.
Well, and you could do it with 2, couldn't you? Egg in a cup. There you go.
2? 2, 4.
What a no, I would never eat 4 eggs. I mean, that is a lot, isn't it? 4 eggs.
Not to me, it's not. We're talking now about pubs, we're talking about beers, we're talking about brewing, and many in the beer and pub sector are worried that without help from the Chancellor, they will have to close.
Yeah, we're talking about it a lot, haven't we? Energy costs, deliveries and ingredients adding to the pressure on pubs, and that's according to those who work in the industry. Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been speaking to some people in that very industry from the Brunswick Inn at Derby, and he joins us live. Good morning to you, Will. Tell us about where you are.
Good morning. Yes, it doesn't take a lot to get me inside of a pub, especially one in the East Midlands. I've heard that Derby is the best place to come because it's apparently the real ale capital of Britain, and I think there's no better way than coming to these sorts of places when you do have to talk about something so big as the spring statement. The cost of living crisis, of course, it's the thing that we're talking about throughout the day. It's the thing that we've been talking about for the last few months, and I think we often think maybe about the regular everyday citizen and what they might be, how they might be affected when it comes to the cost of living crisis. I think sometimes we forget about the individual industries and the individual businesses, and that's why I've come to the Brunswick Inn. It's one of the oldest purpose-built railway terrace pubs inside of all of the country, and I've got the landlord here today, Alan. Alan, it's a really worrying time for regular everyday folk, but if you run a business and you've got bills to pay, it must be quite hard. What are the pressures that you're facing?
Well, we've got the same pressures as everybody in their own household, only we don't have price caps. We've got business rates which are going up this year compared with last. We've got national insurance increases which are going on, individuals pay as well as for every single member of staff. We've got gas bills soaring. We've got energy prices in terms of diesel costs of deliveries. They're all going up the same as everyone else. The only difference is we have not been focused to be able to be given any sort of support at all at the moment.
At this point, I'd usually say to people, what's the specific thing? What's the hardest challenge that you're facing right now? But it seems that there's so many different things lining up, and all you need is maybe one to topple over, and then you've got this big cascade of trouble for businesses like yours.
Yeah, that's quite true. I mean, we've come out of a coronavirus, of course. The government gave quite a lot of support for that, which is really good. But now we need to get through this next crisis. And I'm afraid that there'll be lots of pubs go to the wall because of this, unless there's some serious help given.
Rishi Sunak is the man in charge of this spring statement. What he might do and what you'd like him to do are two different things. What would you actually like him to do?
I'd like him to nil the business rates for the foreseeable future. We see that on the high street as well as in pubs, where pubs are closing, but we also see decimated city centres where shops are all shut. We need to kind of create these into enterprise zones, in my opinion, and the way to do this is to get rid of the business rate on small and medium enterprise businesses. After all, this political party, the Conservative Party, and he is the Chancellor of, are meant to be the party of small and medium-sized enterprise companies. So let's start doing something now then.
Alan, really clear ideas of what you like. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to grab a quick pint. We are going to be speaking more to a few people in the pub and beer industry as we go throughout the day. But I think a lot of people will be looking towards 12:30 when we see what the Chancellor might have to say in his spring statement.
Yeah, and the thing is, Will, people may say, well, I don't drink, I don't care about this. But pubs, increasingly, they're about socialisation, they're about people eating. There are many restaurants, a lot of them rely on that as well. And I think it's also just good for people's social standing, their mindsets. We all need a distraction. We all need a relaxation as well. And so where you go today, there's an atmosphere, isn't there?
Very much so. This is a community pub. It's right next to the train station, so it's not just locals that will come here, it's people that are passing through, and they'll get a flavour of a town. I think, most people will have a real clear idea of the places that they've been because of the pub that they've went to and the people that welcomed them in and the bar staff that served them. And I think it is this really integral part of a community. And I tell you, even if it isn't open yet, the atmosphere here inside the Brunswick is fantastic in terms of just how the estate aesthetic is and the beauty of the atmosphere here. So we are going to have a bit of a look around. We'll see some of the different rooms here, and later on we'll have a bit more of a conversation about how pubs like this that are quite historical, if we were to lose them, what it would mean.
OK, well, leave it there. Thank you. It's the spring statement. It's this mini budget that we're all talking about. Joining us now, Labour Chief Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I should say. There he is, Pat Mcfadden. Pat, good to see you. It is a big day. He's got to get this right. There's a lot of people depending on this. How would you describe the pain out there to people and what the Chancellor must realise?
Well, it's the biggest squeeze in living standards that we've seen for decades, because you've got a few things coming together. You've got rocketing energy prices, which is at the heart of it. That's probably the single most painful thing for people. But you've also got inflation generally, with new figures out this morning showing that's topping 6%. That's big increases in family grocery bills, food bills and so on. But what makes Britain stand out is that on top of all that, you've had this decision from the Chancellor to impose big tax rises on people, which are going to kick in a couple of weeks' time. And that's creating the perfect storm for family finances. And that's the backdrop to the spring statement that we're going to hear today.
Of course, he'll defend that, saying that he and the Prime Minister are committed to try to solve the problems with the backlog in the NHS and indeed tackle the problem of social care, all of which we need as a society.
Of course we do, but the public finances are important here, and the Chancellor finds himself in a healthier position in that regard than he expected to be 6 months ago. The Resolution Foundation, for example, said that tax receipts were expected to be £37 billion higher than expected. Borrowing is expected to be significantly lower than expected. We'll get the exact figures this afternoon, but he's in a healthier position with more room to manoeuvre than he expected. And that begs the question, why press ahead with these tax increases now? And he's given away the answer because the Treasury is constantly briefing Tory MPs and others that the reason that they have to go ahead now is because they want to be in a position to cut taxes before the next election. So this is not a decision driven by the imperative of fundraising for public services. It's not a decision driven by economic circumstances. This is a political decision to increase the pain on families now in order for them to be grateful if the Chancellor manages to cut taxes before the election. We think that's a cynical way to proceed, and the last thing that families need now is an unnecessary tax rise on top of the other cost of living pressures that they're already facing.
And do you think, Pat, people will have long memories with that? Because political expediency, it could make lots of people happier today, but as you say, then there'll be no effect come election time in 2 years' time.
Well, we'll see where we are in 2 years' time, but if he wanted to raise revenues now, what he could have done was impose a windfall levy on the excess profits of the oil and gas companies who are making the most money out of the current situation. You've had the chief executive of BP talking about the current situation being a cash machine for his company. These companies are making an absolute fortune out of these stratospherically high energy prices right now. We've suggested a one-off windfall levy on those companies. If he wants to raise money, that would be a fairer way to do it than hitting hard-working families who are already facing the cost of those rising energy bills.
Yeah, although the risk with all of that, and I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, here we go. We'll just wait for his earpiece. I was just going to say that
here we are.
We were speaking.
We're back on.
You're back on. Good. We were speaking to one commentator this morning that said that's all well and good, the windfall tax, but of course that makes it unfavourable for these companies to stay long term in the country. They could well take their business off to register in a tax haven like the Cayman Islands or whatever it might be, and then we don't benefit from any of the tax revenue from that. No, that was an impartial commentator this morning.
Look, the former chief executive of BP itself, Lord John Browne, has said that a windfall tax is justifiable right now. It is not just the Labour Party saying this. You've got former senior people in BP themselves who are saying this. This is not something unprecedented. George Osborne, Rishi Sunak's predecessor, imposed a windfall tax like this 10 years ago when you had another similar situation with really high oil and gas prices. This is a classic windfall situation. The companies weren't expecting these kind of profits, but they've got them now.
Hopefully we'll get a bigger budget here to pay for better earpieces for you in the future. But the main message is you're saying now the government must act now to ease the worry, ease the burden on people, and we're hearing a lot of that throughout the programme this morning. Pat Mcfadden, we've got to leave it there. Thanks for your time, indeed. Pat is the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break now.
Those earpieces are very difficult.
They are tricky. Well, tell me about it. I had endless problems with mine yesterday. People at home don't realise what a nightmare earpieces can be.
Don't realise. You have no idea what goes on.
They don't fit and they pop out. It's very distracting.
Ours are moulded to our ears, so individual to us. Pat Mcfadden would be given one that's been in 100 different ears. I hope it's sanitised.
Well, I'm actually using a communal one at the moment because my moulded one stopped working 2 days ago, so I'm itching.
Itching. Okay.
It's lovely. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Back with the papers in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I said a minute ago it was going to be the papers, but in fact I was wrong. It's going to be the sport. Lovely Paul Coyte has joined us in the studio, and we're going to talk about tennis of all things to start with.
Lovely Paul Coyte.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. She's great. Thank you.
Also highly inaccurate, but...
High jealousy as well, by the look of it, which is always nice to see.
Touche.
So look, Ashley Barty.
Oh, actually, can I mention something first, which is quite important? Now, have you ever been confused with anybody?
Yes, George Clooney, all the time.
Does it happen all the time?
All the time. Everywhere I go, people say, "What's George doing here?" I think it's only me, humble Eamonn Holmes.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I've got a similar situation to you. There was I went back to Spurs. I was working at Spurs. I was back there doing stuff, working for Tottenham Hotspur for the first time in a while. And someone tweeted, "Andy, great to see Coyte back at Spurs yesterday, even if I nearly did send congratulations to @Spurs Coyote." It turns out the San Antonio Spurs mascot
I see
is
the
a coyote. So there, by the way, I don't know if you can tell which one is which, but the one with the lovely eyes, they're on the right-hand side. So it turns out, what are the chances that Spurs a coyote.
Yeah.
So it turns out he's been getting all my mail.
Has
but
he?
Also, yeah, and also it turns out he's got 10,000 more followers on Twitter than I have.
Brutal.
And that's like a thing that doesn't talk.
Yeah,
so
that's shocking.
You with George Clooney, me with a fake
By a suit,
stuffed
by
animal.
a big coyote suit. Right, OK, so we're going to start with, as you say...
Yeah, 25 years old and she's hanging up her tennis shoes.
She is, and a racket, and it's come as a huge surprise. I was talking to a tennis journalist in Australia just a couple of hours ago. They didn't see it coming. Nobody saw it coming. But she is such a huge hero in Australia. Everybody loves her. There we are. There she is at Wimbledon. So, of course, she's the reigning Wimbledon champion. She won the Australian title as well back in January, and the first Australian to win that title in 44 years.
But she's so talented, she's surely not retiring. She's just going to go on and do some other sport.
Well, I don't know, because the thing is that what she's saying is that it's basically the rigours and the travel and everything she has to go through. And also it's interesting when she does the interview as well. And she's obviously quite upset, very emotional about it. And it's almost like, you know, OK, now I'm going to actually say it and I can't bring myself to say it, and says, I am going to retire. So you think, well, actually, you're going to retire or you have retired?
Yeah.
And I think it's just her way of not actually coming to terms with it.
So the journalist in me instantly thinks there's more to this story. You know, is there sort of mental torment going on? Because we've heard more and more of this, haven't we, from sports stars about, you know, the reality of being at the top of your game, the kind of pressures, the media pressures, the interviews. She's very young to be retiring.
She had quit the sport for a little while a few years ago as well. So the mental torment is obviously a huge thing. And also with lockdown, what they've had to face as well, and the amount of touring that tennis players do. And don't forget, although they have teams, this is someone pretty much on their own. When you're in a team sport, you probably have others that share similar experiences.
Yes.
But she is at the top of her game. She's the best, and the pressure on her is obviously huge. And
good luck to her.
I tell you what, absolutely good luck to her. To retire at the top of your game, I think, is...
She'll be back.
Very brave.
Well, it improves Emily Raducanu's chances as well.
Well, I did think that. I think she could be just scared of Emma Raducanu.
Yeah.
I want to look ahead to the Easter weekend, the FA Cup semi-finals, and what a mess this is. I mean,
I agree.
Liverpool and Manchester City in one of these finals, and no direct train service from either Liverpool or Manchester to London.
It's the first time the semi-finals have been over an Easter weekend. So that's one thing. And the second thing, you've got Manchester City going to be playing Liverpool, and nobody can actually get down to London on a direct train. So it's obviously going to cost fans a fortune, whether they drive, whether they think about flying, how they're going to get down there. The traffic's going to be awful. It's just going to be a nightmare to get to. Now, the first thing you'd think of is, well, why don't you have it at Old Trafford? Why don't you play it locally? Then they can get there easily, because you won't allow that.
We want neither.
I knew you'd say that.
Think of how they would vandalise our stadium or something.
Do you think so? What about Wigan? How about, would you be happy
I'd be
with
fine.
that?
I'd be great. Bolton, I'd be fine.
OK, the FA Cup semi-final will be at Wigan. But the FA have said, well, you know, it's obviously about money, because it's the money that they're going to make. So they don't want it to move away from Wembley. And the FA are saying, yeah, I know, but think of all the money that goes to grassroots, etc. How about thinking about the fans?
Yeah.
How about we actually think of the fans here, first and foremost, because they're the ones that are going to suffer through this.
The FA knew about this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
British Rail or whoever they are let everybody know about this, and that's the weekend. But there you go. That is really... I mean, something just needs to be done. Common sense needs to prevail in this.
I'm not a fan of FA Cups, and I would guess that you're with me.
At Wembley.
The FA Cup semi-finals being at Wembley. Obviously, you get 100,000 people there, but it makes the FA Cup special.
Yeah.
It's been 30 years. It's been a long time since they've done anything different.
Villa Park for both of them.
It used to be. Yeah. But I mean, that would be perfect. But it's just getting the fans there. It's difficult for the fans. And again, fans are being ignored in this situation. So I do feel sorry for them.
Tough one. OK. Paul, got to leave it there. Paul Coyote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
The less
a real
popular,
can of worms there,
less good-looking version. There you go.
Oh, thanks very much. George Clooney over there. I'll keep my mouth shut from now on.
We'll take a break.
So
Stay with
cheeky.
us. We're going inside the newspapers this morning. It's Liam Halligan and Emily Carver. Back with them after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. We're going to take a look at your newspaper front pages this morning. This Wednesday, The Telegraph saying Ukrainian forces have retaken several strategically significant areas in their own country from Russian forces, provoking fears that a desperate Putin may turn to chemical weapons.
Here's the Mirror, and it leads with an emotive appeal from a mother of four struggling to cope with the cost of living crisis, calling on the Chancellor to help poorer families.
The Sun has a world-exclusive photos from inside Vladimir Putin's super yacht, showing off a gold-plated toilet roll holder.
Yeah, absolutely disgusting. Right, so let's go through the newspapers. Got Liam Halligan on this very important day, GB News economics and business editor, and Emily Carver, who's a columnist at Conservative Home. Very nice to see you both.
Nice to see you.
Where should we start? Should we start with the Ukraine crisis, Emily, on the front of the Times? Troops running out of weapons, which is quite shocking, really. I mean, we don't know about the front line specifically, but this is about the civil army, as it was.
Yes, it's particularly shocking because, of course, we've been seeing quite positive news that the Ukrainian military are making some progress, or at least holding on to territory that we thought by now may have been passed to the Russian forces. But this is quite interesting because the Times is now reporting that certain countries are failing to send the military support that they had pledged to. And at the weekend, it was reported by Germany, by the foreign minister, that essentially they'd run out of arms to hand over to Ukraine. So that's rather concerning. And of course, there's been long talk about the fact that many European countries hadn't been holding up their side of the bargain when it came to defence spending. So we've seen that their military may well be depleted, and that may be to the cost of Ukraine. But apparently, according to this report, they've been getting through a week's worth of weapon supplies in 20 hours. So they're getting through this military aid, the arms, so quickly that clearly we need to ramp up what we're handing over to them.
Yeah, really interesting take on that. And staying with the situation, Russia-Ukraine, Liam, I just want to ask you about the FT front page, and they're talking about the pipeline squeeze, raising fears of some sort of Kremlin retaliation.
Geopolitics looms. It's like a new kind of Victorian-era great game. We know that Joe Biden, the US Congress, has been sanctioning Russian oil, not allowing Russian oil to come into the US. The EU and the UK have been talking about doing the same thing too, though not till the end of the year at the earliest. And the Russians are saying, OK, you don't want our oil, then we'll stop sending our oil. And there are reports in the FT that the Russians have put blocks on a pipeline going from Central Asia across the Caspian Basin to the Black Sea and global markets in order to squeeze those global energy markets to push the price of oil up higher. The markets have known about this rumour for a while, and we have indeed seen oil prices creep back up towards $120 a barrel from less than $100 just a week ago, and that, of course, is felt in fuel prices when you fill up your car or van.
Why wouldn't, I mean, Boris Johnson went to Saudi Arabia last week. Why wouldn't they just turn on the taps? Why wouldn't they just increase the flow?
You'd want them to, but, you know, Saudi is a big player in global affairs. It's the global central bank of oil. It's the only country that can really, as we say, just turn the spigot, turn the tap and instantly produce millions of dollars, millions of barrels of oil in addition every day. We use around 100 million barrels of oil every single day. The Saudis have got their own relationship with the Russians. The Iranians have lots and lots of oil, but we've been sanctioning it for years. Suddenly relations between Iran and the West have improved. This is tasteless stuff. This is real politics. We've got viewers and listeners today at home wondering what's going to be in the spring statement, wondering what it means for the cost of living for them and their families. But meanwhile, there's lots of political gamesmanship going on, both domestically and internationally.
OK, we stay with energy, Emily. This is front page of the Telegraph, and the story is about wind farms. Tell us more.
Yes, so there's more cabinet turmoil this time with regards to onshore wind. So essentially, Boris and the cabinet are split over whether they should tear up planning rules that currently prohibit new onshore wind farms. Now, this is quite contentious, of course, because many Tory MPs represent rural areas where the constituents aren't too keen on onshore wind, mostly because it's unsightly and it takes up a lot of space. But of course, with the energy crisis as it is, the government are wanting to keep both to their renewable commitments and try to drive down those prices for consumers and businesses. So they may well tear up these planning rules and allow these onshore wind farms to go up. But of course, even if we have millions of onshore wind, that won't onshore windmills, that won't make up for the need for gas.
Well, it also doesn't make up for the fact that sometimes the wind just doesn't blow.
Well, exactly, and that's why we're in such a difficult situation. You know, a lot of people don't like to see us going to despotic regimes for oil and gas. We all don't like to see it, but that's the real politics of it. And I would like to see the Chancellor, I don't know if this is going to happen, but try to have a look at reforming fracking and have a look at whether we can start that up again.
Well, let's start talking about the Chancellor a bit more then. Liam, let's look at the Daily Mail front page. You can spike the hike, Rishi. Are we going to see the end of the Dishy Rishi days when he's been handing out cash, the most popular Chancellor in recent memory? It's all going to change, isn't it, from today? Yeah, the rubber's hitting the road, as we say, for Rishi Sunak. This is big grown-up politics now for our still pretty youthful and inexperienced Chancellor, with all respect to him. And what the Mail are saying is they're making exactly the argument that Emily was making earlier. He has got extra tax revenue because inflation's been higher. He has got a lot of extra fuel duty because the prices we've been paying on the forecourt have been so much higher. So maybe he can use that money in order to not impose this national insurance increase that's already been legislated for. It's meant to come in April, walloping both employers and firms with additional national insurance costs when times are so difficult. On the other hand, you've then got this kind of counter spin on the front of the FT, and they're saying that actually the Treasury is paying £8.2 billion a month now in debt interest on those huge debts that we've racked up. That's up from £5.4 billion this time last year in February. We're looking, and you're going to hear a lot about this today, Isabel, and I think also in Rishi's speech, we're looking at paying now in excess of £50 billion a year just in debt service on the government's debt. How much is that? That's more than we spend on schools. That's about what we spend on defence. This is on debt interest. And so the Treasury is saying, yes, we can borrow more money, yes, we can do everything that everyone wants us to do, but there's a cost.
Yeah. OK. Guys, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. We've got to leave it there with the time just after 7:45. The guys will be back in about 45 minutes' time. There will be a GB News special programme on the Spring Statement from 11 o'clock today. Liam, you're hosting that one with Gloria Del Piero.
We're getting the old band back together, myself and Gloria Del Piero. The dream team of economics and politics right here on GB News, a 5-hour special.
5-hour special. OK, save your energy, but come back to us again. Come back to us again in about 45 minutes.
It's going to be a long day. I'm clinging to my coffee.
You're going to need some fuel duty relief at the end of this. Right, as over 300,000 refugees are fleeing the war in Ukraine to Hungary, some are choosing to stay in the country.
Well, our reporter, Rosie Wright, she's in Budapest to exactly tell us what's happening, Rosie.
Yeah, a very good morning to both of you and welcome into the Turbina Arts Centre. At this stage, there's a bar behind me, which in the evenings is, of course, kicking with music, concerts, venues, comedy. But many places in this city have been transformed as the war started. This concert venue now being used as a school. We're going backstage here, and look, there we go, backstage. This is where all the artists would normally prepare to get ready. Today, and for the last few weeks, it's been a school. Let's sort of creep in. Lessons haven't quite started yet. We sort of kick off with maths at 9 o'clock. But lots of children and their families have come here. This is a place for Ukrainian families, set up by Ukrainian teachers who've come here, who've decided it's really important to provide a place of lessons. I'm just going to interrupt, actually. This is Arena. Sorry. Hello. Talking to one of the teachers. Can we come in through into the classroom? So these actually are the changing rooms for the artists. Today, classrooms. Let's come in. Arena, thank you very, very much for speaking to us. You're here with 3 of your children, 2 of your boys and a daughter. Just explain, when was it that you came from Ukraine to Hungary and how did you get here?
I spent in my country, I'm from Chernihiv, 10 days, and then I left Chernihiv, stayed for 4 days in Ukraine, and then I decided to go to Europe because I didn't feel safe there, especially with 3 kids. And I came to Hungary 2 weeks ago, and I would like to say thank you very much to all people who help us and support us in this beautiful country.
It's been a very traumatic couple of weeks for your family. This is just a stopgap, isn't it? Because where do you want to go?
Yes, this is just the stop, because I understood that I have to decide which country should I take, because my city is completely destroyed and I can't to come back to my city, and I decided to choose England because I know English and I think it will be much better for me to live there and find a job.
You're quite unusual as a family. You know, the team here, we've been here for 3 weeks and we haven't met many Ukrainians trying to get to the UK. Just explain to us what the process has been like so far.
UK government opened 2 opportunities for Ukrainian. One of opportunity is family visa if you have some relatives there. I don't have. That is why I choose second wave is sponsor program. What do you need to do first? You need to find a sponsor. You can't find, there are a lot of chats, there are a lot of pages in Facebook where you can put some information about your family, and in English families will answer you. And when you find a sponsor, a sponsor is supposed to apply some application, and second stop is you have to apply for visa and wait. It's what are we doing now? We are just waiting for the answer.
Do you know when you might get any clarity on when you can go to the UK?
No idea. No ideas, because this is the first program even for UK government, and I don't know how many days or weeks it will take.
I know the plan is to get to London. We're going to stay in touch, and when you get there, of course, we'd love to meet you and see how you and your 3 children are getting on. Irina, thank you very much for speaking to us and just talking us through what the process has been like. We should probably vacate this room because maths is about to start. Really just makeshift lessons, makeshift classrooms in these changing rooms for lots of children. As for in Irina's case, they are waiting to work out what happens next. When will they get that permission to say, yeah, your documents are sorted, London is the next stop?
Rosie, thank you very much indeed. Live from Budapest there, Rosie Wright. A judge has found President Putin critic Alexei Navalny guilty of fraud and contempt in what Amnesty International has described as sham trial.
Yes, Navalny could now move to a maximum security penal colony to reduce his communications with his team of protesters. And the Russian exile and aide to Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Ashkarov, joins us now. Very good morning to you. Look, this is terrible, what we saw happening yesterday in what's being described as a sham trial of Navalny. The only, I suppose, the chink of hope in all of this is that his sentence could be shortened due to the amount of time he's already spent in jail.
Well, the bad news didn't happen yesterday. When Navalny was illegally incarcerated a little over a year ago after he returned to Russia, we understood that Vladimir Putin intends to keep him behind the bars for the time that Putin is in power.
How long will Putin stay in power?
It's difficult to predict, but this brutal aggression that Russia has been undertaking against Ukraine over the last month definitely brings forward the demise of this regime. It weakens it, the enormous economic cost that it brings to Russian economy, to the Russian population, will inevitably result in Putin leaving.
There are parallels, I don't know if you'd agree, between Alexei Navalny and Volodymyr Zelensky in terms of resilience, in terms of determination, in terms of facing up to Putin. Do you think it is much harder than Alexei Navalny is making it look? Because, you know, he comes out looking strong, there's no tears, but we know behind the scenes he's facing awful conditions, solitary confinement, amongst many things. I'm sure you can tell us about them.
Sure. Well, Alexei Navalny was an inspiration to democratically minded Russian people throughout his political career. Despite the political persecution that he was suffering, he was always projecting the message of a beautiful new Russia based on democratic values. And his resolve, his moral stance is a source of inspiration for many people. Indeed, in prison, he faces quite harsh conditions, and they are artificially manufactured to make his prison additional torture. But he sends his messages from prison, from the court bench, and he does it with the same conviction and resolve and irony, if I may say, that shows that he's not broken, and he really remains the leader of the Russian opposition.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the leader of Russia, front pages of the papers here have the Sun inside his £500 million yacht, and the decadence and the luxury is absolutely obscene in that. Are the Russian people aware of this man and what he is doing in their name?
Of course, the Russian state propaganda fills the TV screens and newspapers with disinformation about Nazism in Ukraine and the aggressive policy of the West towards Russia. Many people get their information from internet, which is, of course, freer, but Russian authorities have been putting limits on use of internet. You cannot use Twitter or Facebook or Instagram without resorting to VPNs, special computer mechanisms to get access to these sites. So definitely many Russians don't get objective information about the war and about the situation. But the economic cost of this war and of the mismanagement of economy of Russian government really hits people with pockets, and the dissent with how Russia is governed is growing.
Vladimir, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Vladimir Shurkov is a Russian exile and a former aide to Alexei Navalny. Thank you very much indeed for that.
OK, look, it's a big day. Of course, we're expecting that autumn, I keep saying that spring statement from the Chancellor a little bit later on today. We've been hearing from you throughout the course of the morning, getting in touch about what you're concerned about. One email in saying, my total income, this is from Keith, is around $14,500, of which my state pension is about 70%. Having betrayed pensioners by scrapping the triple lock, Sunak is now increasing my pension by 3.5%, when inflation is or will be at least 8%. Where is the help for pensioners from this millionaire? And there's a lot of that sort of concern, isn't there? Whether it's people on benefits, people with pensions, that it's just not increasing in line with inflation.
Or the working poor. So there you are. That is the big story today. The spring statement from the Chancellor. We'll have a GB News special from 11 o'clock today with Liam Hannigan and Gloria Del Piera. Back with all the news, top of the hour. Hope you can join us.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Chancellor delivers his spring statement today, but will it help those who need it most?
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Thank you very much indeed for watching and increasing our listening and viewing figures, going up, 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 thanks to you. We're on TV, we're on radio, we're online, we have an app. Download it and add to that audience. Leading the news this morning.
The Chancellor will present his spring statement today to the House of Commons. We'll find out how his decisions will affect the pound in your pocket.
And we'll hear from small businesses, breweries and you, the GB News viewers, about the cost of living and what the government needs to do to help those most in need, which may well be you.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russian forces have entered the city of Mariupol after two massive explosions rocked the city. One human rights organisation has described it as a freezing hellscape riddled with dead bodies and destroyed buildings.
And it's been 2 years to the day since lockdown was announced. We'll be discussing today's National Day of Reflection, remembering those who lost their lives to COVID.
Plus, she's the queen of the stage. Actress Ruthie Henschel tells us about her starring in a Stephen Sondheim classic and the thrill of welcoming crowds back to the theatre.
Let us know if you've been to the theatre, what you've been enjoying, or any of the discussions we're having today on the programme. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet at gbnews. Well, the story we're concentrating on this morning is what the Chancellor will deliver and what he will say in his spring statement to the House of Commons.
Yes, originally it was intended to be just a simple economic update, but the war in Ukraine and, of course, the ongoing cost of living crisis has now transformed it into a key moment for the Chancellor.
Energy bills going sky high and inflation have meant that many families and small businesses are struggling to make ends meet and are appealing to the government for relief.
Well, the Chancellor is tipped to make security the focus of his speech today, not just in the form of weapons and aid to Ukraine, but also in the security of the resilient public finances and a faster growing economy.
So he will reportedly vow to stand by a term I can't stand, hard-working families, as if everybody isn't hard-working. But there you go. Some of you work more than others, but that's the term politicians patronisingly troop out, hard-working families, to help with the escalating cost of living crisis. Now, many are hoping for a cut to fuel duty and a delay to the rise in national insurance. That's what we're hearing most of all throughout the programme today.
But after that unprecedented financial support for many during the pandemic, there are questions over how far the Chancellor will go in this statement, despite pressure to spend and to borrow more.
Looking back at last year to his autumn budget, he made clear that his intention going forward would be to balance the books and cut taxes in the future. But when is that future?
And as we've been hearing this morning, inflation has surged to 6.2%. Rishi Sunak's tenure as Chancellor so far has really been defined by massive spending and taxes at the highest level for 70 years.
Well, let's get his take on things, the ramifications of what will be said or not said today. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, on this one. So inflation is one of the key issues.
It certainly is. When we were kids, Eamonn, inflation in the UK was in double digits. It got up to almost 25% at one point. What does inflation do? It makes it really hard for wages to keep up with the cost of living. It means you get lots of industrial action and sort of political rancour. It means that business leaders find it really hard to invest because they don't know what prices are going to be. So how can you know if you're going to make any money? And you mentioned inflation is there at 6.2%. That's a new 30-year high. That's the year to February. So before this Russia-Ukraine conflict, the invasion was at the very end of February. So that 6.2% number doesn't include the impact of Russia-Ukraine on petrol prices, on food prices. But I would look not at the consumer price index, which is the headline number the government wants us to look at. I'd look at the broader retail price index. If you've got a mobile phone contract, it goes up by the retail price index. Train fares tend to go up by the retail price index. Yeah. If you're in a council house, your rent tends to be linked to the retail price index.
Your satellite subscription, everything that helps.
In the real world, the retail price index, RPI is the important one, that's just hit 8.2%. Before the impact of Russia-Ukraine. We are heading for double-digit inflation, no question.
So that's the backdrop to all of this. And, you know, many people would expect then a Conservative Chancellor to be cutting taxes. In fact, we're going to see the opposite today. A lot of people are saying this could be the worst time tax hike in history or recent history.
Indeed, that's the pressure Rishi Sunak is under. He came up with this tax rise for national insurance contributions for employers and employees, as we've been discussing today, to pay for the NHS backlog, to pay for reform of social care. He came up with it and legislated for it last autumn at the time when he had an actual budget. Now it looks much different. The world has changed. Our economic prospects look much, much tougher. So a lot of Tory backbenchers, a lot of cabinet ministers off the record are saying, why do the tax rise now? Labour are saying, why do the tax rise now?
Because the National Health Service will be in a better place in 2 years' time and we'll be heading to a general election.
And indeed, there's that political gamesmanship there. Maybe he's raising taxes now so he can cut them later. But if that national insurance rise tips your business over the edge and you lose what you've been working for, if that national insurance rise means you can't buy your kids shoes or you can't pay your fuel bill, you're not going to think much of his political games. And this inflation we're discussing, it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, people that don't want this tax rise are saying inflation means he gets more money, he gets more money from fuel duty, he gets more money from VAT, and he does. But inflation means that the state's own bills go up, bills for fuel, bills for wages, all kinds of things. So inflation actually squeezes his balance sheet on the one hand, as well as expanding it on the other.
And we've got to just talk about fuel duty. We are expecting him to cut that by 5 pence per litre, quite a lot less than we're seeing in other European countries like Ireland or France.
Or indeed Germany.
Yeah.
He has to do something on fuel duty. Fuel duty's been frozen for the last 8 years or so. But still, when you go and pay for petrol or diesel on the forecourt, 55, 60% of everything you pay is tax. It's very heavily taxed in the UK. So fuel duty will come off a bit. The fact is, though, that oil prices are still creeping up. And it may be that the impact of fuel duty lowering petrol and diesel prices is offset over the coming weeks by the impact of rising oil prices on those petrol and diesel prices. One thing is petrol and diesel prices have been going up, even when oil prices have levelled off. So there will be accusations of profiteering.
Liam's going to be back in half an hour's time with the newspapers with Emily Carver, and then again a special look at this spring statement from the Chancellor here on GB News with Gloria Del Piero from 11 through to 4. OK, mate. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
OK, we've been speaking to and talking about small businesses a great deal, and this morning we're joined by our London reporter, Alice Porter, who is at one of those small firms, Crown Lane Recording Studio in South London. So, Alice, how does all of this affect them?
Hi there, good morning. Yes, I'm at this fabulous studio in South London. I'm on a bit of a hunt to find out what small businesses are hoping for when it comes to the spring statement. I'm joined here by John Merriman, who's director of this fantastic studio. Thank you so much for letting me in this morning. I mean, what are your hopes for the spring statement? We've got Rishi Sunak making an announcement later this afternoon. As someone who owns a small business, what are you hoping for from it?
I'm really hoping for some stability with this. Everything's changing at the moment for small businesses. We have a coffee shop at the front called Metronome and the studio at the back. Both businesses are affected by whichever way his decisions go today. So the minimum wage hike is a huge thing. We know that's coming anyway, so we're preparing for that. But with around 500 hours of staff time per month on a small business, £1 more per hour is a huge hike there. So we're preparing for that. But any surprises are going to really hit small businesses hard this morning.
Now, of course, we've been talking a lot on GB News about the cost of living and, of course, particularly sort of fuel increases. And a lot of people are hoping Rishi Sunak is going to be making some sort of announcement, perhaps a fuel duty relief in that regard. I mean, as somebody who you're running a coffee shop as well as this business here with a recording studio, I mean, how has the fuel increases in price that we've seen, how has that impacted your business?
It's the entire chain all the way down. So, for example, milk prices went up in December by 20%, and then in February a further 20%, all put down to delivery drivers and the cost of getting the food to, for example, the cows. That was one of the biggest costs at the beginning, a lot of that coming from Europe. So the costs right from the source ingredients through to just general minimum orders now they used to be around 50, 60, 70 pounds for a minimum order in the coffee shop. Now they're heading towards 100, 200 pounds for minimum orders. So that means the smaller businesses are going to struggle more. So without some support with the fuel costs, then small businesses will keep being hit hard by this.
Well, John, thank you so much for letting me come along here today. Really appreciate it. A lot of small businesses will be quite anxious to see what's in store for them with the spring statement out later today.
Appreciate it, Alice. Thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Mark Harper. Mark is a former parliamentary secretary to the Treasurer, now Conservative backbencher. Mr Harper, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Could I ask you straight, do you think it's the right time to plough ahead with the national insurance increase?
Yeah, straight answer, yes, I do, for this reason. As we recover from the pandemic, we've got massive pressures in the health service, and we've got to deal with those backlogs, and we've got to deal with the long-term funding for social care. And I'm afraid if you want to spend the money on those services, you've got to be honest and straightforward about how you're going to pay for it, which is what the National Insurance Rise is for. You can't just keep borrowing money for the foreseeable future. So I'm afraid anyone who says they want to get rid of the National Insurance Rise, unless they can tell you how they're going to pay for the funding, then they're not in favour of funding dealing with backlogs and dealing with social care. And I'm afraid if you want to spend the money...
I'll tell you how you could pay for it. Tell you how you could pay for it, and that's from your tax receipts. I mean, the government have already got 37 billion more than the OBR were forecasting last October. That would easily pay for social care. That's around 14 billion expected to be raised from this national insurance hike. So why not just do it that way?
Well, first of all, I obviously haven't seen the OBR's forecast for today, but I think you've got to look at the other side of the ledger as well. We saw this week that the increase in inflation and the increase in interest rates that we've seen also mean that the government's facing more debt interest. And I saw a story yesterday in one newspaper. If that turns out to be true, we're very shortly going to be paying more money in debt interest than we spend on our entire education system. So I think the Chancellor's got to remember also that there are future shocks. The economic outlook is very uncertain. You know, we'd only just finished dealing with the COVID pandemic and we saw Russia's appalling invasion of Ukraine. If you spend every single penny you've got, you leave yourself no resilience, no ability to help people. And we saw just in February the Chancellor was able to find £9 billion of taxpayers' money to help people deal with the rise in energy prices that we're going to see kick in from the 1st of April. Now, that was only available because he'd taken difficult, prudent decisions earlier, and I want to make sure the government's in a position to help people in the future if it needs to. So it's a balance today. He's got to help people where he can, but he's also got to have an eye on the future and deal with future economic shocks that are coming, and that's what a responsible Chancellor needs to do, rather than just spend every single penny of upside.
Are you saying people think they're suffering, people think it's hard, people think this hurts at the moment, but you better be careful because it may hurt even more in the future, and therefore we've got to be ready for that?
That's entirely right. I mean, look, we're facing a very difficult situation. We don't know what's going to happen with Russia and Ukraine. We don't know how long that's going to go on for. That's clearly having a big impact on energy prices. People are seeing that both at the petrol pump and in the prices they pay for their home energy. And we simply don't know how long that's going to go on for. The economic forecasts, I think, are going to be very uncertain. And the one thing we know from the last couple of years' experience, we don't know what the world's going to throw at us. And so I think the Chancellor's going to help people today where he can and use some of the resilience that the government has, but I think he's also got to be conscious that we don't know what's going to be thrown at us in the future, and a responsible Chancellor has got to make difficult decisions to balance those things so he can do. I'm sure we'll see some help for people today, but I think he's got to be mindful of the challenges facing us going forward.
You've got to admit, though, Mark Harper, it does feel like a parallel world when you see some members of the Labour Party saying that they don't actually support this increase in national insurance. And, you know, here we are with the difficult headline for the Chancellor today. It says Sunak to lay aside this windfall cash rather than helping households. I mean, it's very hard for a Conservative Prime Minister to say, I'm going to put my arms around working families and look after them, when you're actually seeing he's increasing taxes, when we're expecting living standards to go down to the worst they have been in 70 years.
Well, look, I'd say two things on that. Firstly, on Labour's position, if you're going to say you're not in favour of the national insurance increase, but you're not prepared to say how you're going to fund those increases in the National Health Service to deal with backlogs or the long-term funding for social care, then I'm afraid you're just not a serious political party. They're not prepared to make the difficult decisions and the tough choices that are necessary to govern. You've got to make choices if you're in government, and Labour, I think, are just showing that they're still not fit to govern. On the issue facing the government about helping people. I think the Chancellor does need to do that. We demonstrated that we would help people in February when he set out a very significant package, £9 billion, to deal with some of the impact of the energy price rise that we're going to see kick in when the price cap goes up on the 1st of April. So that was about half of the impact of that has either been dealt with or smoothed by the taxpayer. He can't get rid of all of it, but he helped people. He was only able to do that because he'd taken difficult decisions in his previous budgets so that that economic firepower was available to him to help people. So I think, yes, he'll help people where he can today, and absolutely I would welcome that. But he's also got to be mindful of the challenges coming in the future. That's what a prudent Chancellor has to do, and that's what I expect him to set out at lunchtime today.
Mark, you state the case very well. Where is your constituency?
Sorry, in the Forest of Dean.
Right, Forest of Dean. So when you have your clinics and your constituents are coming to talk to you, do they understand, are they as accepting of your argument that you're making today as you would like them to be?
Well, look, I always set these things out honestly with people. I've always found being straightforward and honest with people is the right approach. And I say to people, look, I've had these conversations about energy prices, for example, and I've said, look, the government can't make the high energy price impact go away completely. But what we did in February was we tried to help people. We've got a cut in council tax of £150 for people on band A to D. That's going to help a bit. Coming in the autumn, we've got a cut in energy bills which will help smooth the impact over the next 5 years. So that's about half of the impact of that energy price rise. But I've been honest with people, you can't pretend that energy prices haven't gone up. That's made the country poorer, but the government's done what it can to try and help those at the bottom end of the income scale and those struggling deal with those shocks. And I think that's what the government needs to do. It can't make all the difficult challenges go away, but what it can do is try and stand alongside the public and try and help them get through what is going to be, I think, a very difficult series of months and years to come as we face the very difficult international situation, which is not making things any easier.
Mark Harper, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning. And Mark's a former parliamentary secretary to... Not at all, thank you. And he's MP for Forest of Dean. It's very interesting talking to Mark there. All I could hear was the birds cheeping.
Well, thank goodness it was drilling the other day, working on the Palace of Westminster. We couldn't hear what was being said on College Green, but isn't that lovely? Spring has sprung.
Spring has sprung, the grass has been. What is that? Spring has sprung, the grass is green. I wonder where Isabel has been.
Well, you were thinking that. When you started talking about Forest of Dean, I went on a school trip there as a kid, and we had a song. There was a girl in my class called Nadine, and we were all singing, Forest of Dean, look what you've done to my friend Nadine. That's all spinning around in my head.
So smart.
Anyway.
Oh, well, I want to say, sorry, I was detained by the police this morning.
What were you doing, Mr. Holmes?
I wasn't, they thought I'd stolen the car that I was in.
Why was that? Were you speeding?
No, not at all. Very courteous young constables called Lloyd and Natalie in their 20s. Really, if they were my children, I'd be so proud of them. And because I came out of a car very early in the morning out of a certain street, and cars had been targeted in that street.
Oh, I see. They thought you'd nicked it.
I thought I'd nicked it. And I said, look, there it is there. And I thought, do I look like a car thief? I said to them. But they were very good, very conscientious. They went through everything. And if the car had been stolen, it's nice to know that Lloyd and Natalie were on the scene there, ready to do that. And just very good to Surrey Police. Give them a box of chocolates or something today.
Yeah, same police force didn't manage to catch my parents' car that got nicked off their drive.
Well, I'm only speaking, my car's fine. That's it.
Despite the CCTV we provided them with. Anyway.
Here's the weather.
Here's the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGibbon. A cracking start out there. Once again, chilly at first, but with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will rise, and again, it's going to feel warm this afternoon, much warmer than you'd expect for the time of year. High pressure sitting to the east. We've again got this gentle southerly airflow. That's bringing predominantly cloud-free skies, but it's also bringing some warmth with it. Now, for the start of the fog patches, primarily across northeast England, but they lift in the next few hours, and then for the vast majority, it's blue skies and sunshine for the rest of the day. outside chance of a shower, for example, the north of Scotland, perhaps the east of England later on. Really the exception here rather than the rule. For the vast majority, it's blue skies, it's dry and it's warm. 15 to 18 Celsius widely. Could get 19 or 20 degrees somewhere like London, Cambridge, Manchester or the far north of Scotland. Into the evening and skies remain clear. I think we'll see a bit more of a breeze there for Cornwall at times through the day. A bit of patchy cloud as well. But thicker cloud arrives into western Scotland, the far north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, perhaps to bring a few light showers by the end of the night. Otherwise, it's clear skies as we wake up on Thursday and another fresh start. A few fog patches, but the sun soon gets to work, lifting those temperatures, lifting the fog. And again, barely a cloud in the sky for parts of eastern Scotland into much of England and Wales. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing those thicker clouds at times through the afternoon and seeing some spots of rain around western coasts and hills. But for the vast majority, it's dry and it's warm again, 15 to 17 Celsius generally. Now, similar weather conditions are expected on Friday and Saturday, so that means widespread sunny skies. But for the north and west of Scotland, for Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud at times and feeling cooler here.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Latest headlines in this Wednesday morning, they look like this. In the last hour, official figures show the inflation rate in February rose to 6.2%. That's up from 5.5% in January, according to the Office for National Statistics. More on this, of course, throughout the programme with our economics editor, Liam Halligan.
The United States and its allies are considering whether to remove Russia from the G20 group following its actions in Ukraine. But the measure is likely to be vetoed by other members such as China, India and Saudi Arabia. Instead, it's thought some countries may boycott the meeting.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have visited Bob Marley's home and met Jamaica's sporting greats as they visit the country for day 4 of the royal tour. It's as protesters gathered at the British Embassy in Kingston with placards and accusations that the monarchy has benefited from what they claim is blood, tears and sweat of slaves.
The Prime Minister has been paying tribute to what he calls the heroic efforts of NHS staff on the second anniversary of the first national lockdown. Boris Johnson also offered his sympathies to those bereaved by coronavirus, saying those who died will never be out of our hearts and minds.
The weather is warming up this week, which will be a welcome sight to some, but not so for those who suffer from hay fever. Experts warn rising temperatures may cause tree pollen levels to spike across the country. According to the Met Office, the coming week will see dry, sunny weather with daytime temperatures in mid to late teens.
Now, where were you 2 years ago today? Do you remember the moment we all crowded around our TVs and we saw the Prime Minister take the unprecedented step of putting the country into its first ever national lockdown? I can remember that day vividly, can you? It was really quite frightening at the time. That first stay-at-home order was put in place on the 23rd of March 2020 to combat the spread of COVID-19.
Well, the country will now pay tribute to those who lost their lives with a national day of reflection. A minute's silence will be held at midday today, and people are being encouraged to shine a light or display flowers in their windows at 8 o'clock tonight.
Well, we're joined now by Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence, who treated COVID patients during the initial lockdown. And it's really interesting to get your take on all of this because, of course, it was a very difficult time for everybody, but doctors... and I have many friends who expressed this to me, were very frightened because they were also having to continue to go to work, not really knowing what they were up against. So just tell us a little bit about your experience. Take us back 2 years today.
Honestly, time has completely flown. I remember that exact day 2 years ago, just like we all do. I was working in general practice at the time, and our practice policies changed literally overnight. We went from seeing patients face-to-face, seeing families, joining them in consultations, to a lot of remote teleclinics, which is a very different ballgame when you're trying to treat a patient. You know, we lost that patient contact. And then quickly, lots of us were redeployed from our day jobs to work on the front line in the hospitals. So I myself was sent to work in A&E, which was a completely different experience, having never worked there before. So it was very quick learning.
And look, a lot of doctors, a lot of A&E wards weren't able to get PPE, were they? I mean, we were all hearing these awful accounts that doctors were going to be given specially personally fitted masks and the like, and this simply wasn't happening in those early days. Do you remember all of that kind of fear about personally contracting it, as well as dealing with the onslaught of patients in this kind of unknown situation?
So from my perspective, working in central London, we were very lucky to have all adequate PPE. We were very well equipped here. What I think the anxiety came from was, you know, going home to our families and feeling that sense of responsibility that we were on the front line treating patients, but then didn't want to take home the virus. So I think a lot of doctors and social care workers, healthcare workers, kind of took an extra responsibility to personally isolate, which obviously does have a big toll on, you know, your mental health after a stressful day at work.
What sort of toll has there been on mental health in general, would you say?
I think over the last 2 years, we can all say that what the events have significantly impacted our mental health. There have been studies and qualitative studies that have shown that over a third of adults report that their mental health has been negatively affected by this. You know, social isolation, loneliness, bereavement, loss of income and fear are all known to prompt development of new mental health conditions, but also exacerbate symptoms of existing ones. So I think we are really going to see the kind of knock-on impact of the effects of mental health going forward.
And Dr. Frankie, we're talking a lot today about the Chancellor doing his spring statement, and one of the things that we'll be talking about, of course, is you know, how people will be coping with just getting back to normal, coping with going to the NHS, relying on those services which the government are committed to trying to sort out. Is that something that you think really needs, you know, is it worth the tax hike that the Chancellor's talking about, trying to tackle the backlog that the NHS is seeing as a result of lockdowns?
I think it's really important that we tackle the backlog now. I work in oncology and cancer services, and you know, in 2020, 40,000 fewer people started cancer treatments, and we're definitely seeing the effects of busier clinics now. So I think going forward, we all need to make that a priority. You know, people who are sitting at home with niggles that they haven't seen their GP about, symptoms, mental health concerns, should all come forward now and get the treatment that they didn't get during COVID.
But COVID hasn't gone away, has it?
COVID hasn't gone away. It's very much still there, just like many other respiratory viruses that we see year on year.
OK. Continued success with what you do. As you say, you know, work in oncology, people with terrible cancer cases there, and good luck to you and dealing with the rise of people who haven't had tests. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence. Thank you. Right, with the time at 8:30, please do stay with us because we're going to be looking through the newspapers with Liam Halligan and Emily Carver right after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:32. Lots more coming up on Breakfast today. As we mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, we'll be asking the royal biographer, Robert Hardman, what we can expect from those celebrations. Also be talking, of course, about his brand new book. He's in the studio with us just after 9 o'clock.
And after 2 years away from the stage, Theatre Queen Ruthie Henshaw is back for Stephen Sondheim's multi-award-winning production Passion. Come the summer, we'll be catching up with her for a preview on that in about 50 minutes' time.
OK, let's take a look at some of this morning's front pages. The Telegraph says Ukrainian forces have retaken several strategically significant areas in their country from Russian forces, provoking fears that a desperate Putin may turn to chemical weapons.
Here's the Mirror. It's got an emotive appeal from a mother of four struggling to cope with the cost of living crisis, calling on the Chancellor to help poorer families.
And the Mail calls on Rishi Sunak to roll back what they call the worst-timed tax rise in history ahead of today's spring statement.
Looking at the papers, Emily Carver and Liam Halligan, the papers saying they're the worst-timed tax rise in history. Liam, do you agree?
I think that's certainly an argument that a lot of the Chancellor's adversaries are making, including people on his own backbenches. And indeed the Labour Party. They don't want to see this increase in national insurance now. They accept the argument that we've got to raise more money for the NHS to tackle that post-COVID backlog. We've got to reform social care. But as ever in politics, it's we need virtue, but not today.
Emily?
I think after the pandemic, we need to be going for growth. So that doesn't mean tax hikes, although it would be nice to see if the reports are correct that the Chancellor will be raising the threshold, so at least that will help soften the blow for those on the lowest of incomes.
OK, Emily, let's start talking then a little bit about what we can expect from the Chancellor today. We are expecting a spring statement. In fact, actually, Liam, you've chosen the story quite rightly, about pricey petrol. This is on page 8 of The Sun.
This, I think, will be the headline that the Chancellor wants on the front of the papers tomorrow, that he has lowered the fuel duty, so lowering the price of petrol and diesel when we fill up our cars and vans on the forecourt. He has got a lot more money because petrol prices have been rising. That means he gets more VAT, more fuel duty. So inflation kind of generates money for him, which he can then give back. That's what his detractors say.
Why just 5p? He could be a bit more generous, couldn't he?
He could be a bit more generous, particularly when global energy markets are so turbulent. We've got oil prices, just in the last few days, they've spiked from less than 100 to almost $120 a barrel. That, of course, is what you make petrol and diesel from. So that gives the retailers an excuse, if you like, to raise those prices. We are going to see a bit of a dogfight behind the scenes, I think, between the government and those petrol retailers, with accusations of profiteering, which the petrol retailers deny. There's an organisation called Fair Fuel UK. There's another organisation called Pump Watch. These guys have a big presence now on social media, trying to pressure the politicians to make sure that petrol retailers don't use an inflationary environment to unduly raise prices.
OK. Let's go to The Guardian. Emily, you want us to talk about why there may be a lot of school kids watching us this morning who shouldn't be. Absenteeism.
Yes, I mean, you were just talking about with your last guest about how it's been 2 years since the first lockdown. And it seems that, I mean, we know this, but it seems like COVID certainly hasn't gone away. The Guardian is reporting on page 25 that absences have jumped massively in the last couple of weeks in schools. 202,000 pupils were off school on the 17th of March because of the virus. And then you've also got tens of thousands of staff. So that just shows the continued disruption in schools. I don't know whether people are taking a particularly cautious approach, staying off school with very minor symptoms. Will that keep continuing for months and months and months? Or will there be an understanding that unless you've got, you know, what we in the past would have gone off school for, those kind of symptoms, or if this is a case of people testing still very regularly.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there was a half-term 2 weeks ago or so as well, wasn't there? Could they just be people beaking off for holidays?
Well, there's always that, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people did use the excuse of COVID to perhaps take a few more days off at holiday times.
I was just speaking from my own primary school at the moment. There's so many cases in the last couple of weeks. It's just doing another round at the moment, particularly.
Did you say beaking off, Eamonn?
Yeah, like that phrase.
We bunked off.
Well, bunked off. Yeah, you also hiked off. Hiked off was another
played
one.
hooky.
Yeah, that's okay. But on, how many words can we get for this? Yeah, didn't turn up anyway, for whatever reason. Were you good at hiking off school?
No comment.
Isabel, I bet you never did it.
Well, I caught the train to school, and sometimes if the trains were delayed, then I would be, you know, I could sometimes be a bit later.
Did you catch your later train ever so you could meet a certain boy? Or
there
try
were
to?
boys from the local school that I did meet on the trains, yes.
Oh, I think he's in that character.
Yeah, I remember his name and everything.
So now we go to the Times front page. Fertility rate didn't increase during the pandemic, despite predictions that people were going to get cosier than they would normally.
Yes, I mean, at the start of the pandemic, at the start of the lockdown, people were hopeful that this perhaps could be one of the positive consequences of lockdown, because, of course, we've been talking about fertility rates going down for a long time. Women are putting it off longer and longer. But apparently no such boom happened. We're below 2019 levels.
But I mean, the idea that that meant people weren't getting jiggy is nonsense. It just means people understand contraception, clearly.
Well, exactly.
Or maybe lockdown sent us all mad and we were sick of each other within a couple of days.
Yeah, it's a bit of an old-fashioned view to think that it's because people were locked up together that suddenly they'd be, procreating.
Exactly.
But also, I didn't think the pandemic created the mood to bring another life into the world.
Yeah,
exactly. Quite scary times and just not knowing what's ahead.
Yes, and I think there were many stories of people who obviously split during the pandemic, who couldn't stand the sight of each other. All those little things that used to be charming became irritating under lockdown conditions. So hardly fertile ground for
homeschooling is enough to put you off wanting to have children, let me tell you. OK, let's look at windfall taxes. Liam, of course, something's going to be talked about a huge amount today. This is in the FT page 2. Oil bosses are hoping to escape that. We heard this morning from Pat Mcfadden from Labour that this is something that they would like to see. We also heard from a commentator this morning that there would be, I suppose, conservative fears that that might push some companies overseas so that none of the tax benefits are felt here in the UK.
Well, Labour proposed a windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies a while ago, and they've been getting considerable airplay. And frankly, I'm not surprised, given what's happened to oil prices and then for the profits of the oil majors, profits that they weren't expecting. What the FT is saying is that there's been some kind of quid pro quo, some kind of deal done behind closed doors in government, that if the big oil majors escape a windfall tax, which lots of people are calling for, given that pump prices rise even when oil prices aren't rising, then in return they will invest more, particularly in North Sea oil and gas. When I interviewed the Energy Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng last week for GB News, he made it absolutely clear the North Sea is back. We want big investment in the North Sea. We're talking about tens of billions of pounds to develop these wells, to get that oil and gas out that we know is there, to enhance our own energy security. The big oil companies know the government wants that to happen, so they are going to, again, use that power to fend off the notion of a windfall tax. Some people say a windfall tax would be illegal. Tony Blair had a windfall tax in 1997. It went through the courts. It was fine. Geoffrey Howe, back in the early 80s, put a windfall tax on the banks. It could yet happen, but I suspect it won't.
Yeah, I think, in fact, Pat Mcfadden was quoting George Osborne as having had a windfall tax as well. I can't remember what he said it was for.
He had many retrospective taxes, I believe George Osborne did. But I would say on a windfall tax is that I can understand the sentiment, particularly when you see these oil companies raking in massive profits. But I would just say that, of course, during the pandemic, during lockdown, they had massive losses. So they have extraordinary high turnovers. So that explains that. But also, you know, we don't want to be putting off investment at a time where we're, you know, running low on supply. So got to think about all these things, although it's quite a populist sentiment to just sort of windfall tax successful companies.
A lot of people who watch GB News have a big interest in fake news and what they perceive as fake news. You're going to the eye here, page 13, Emily, and Chinese media getting involved in this.
Yes, so apparently, according to research by the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, Chinese state media is using Facebook to post disinformation about Ukraine following Russia's invasion. So they've said things like Vladimir Zelensky is controlled by George Soros. They've said that NATO expansion was comparable to Hitler's attempts to control Ukraine. And the charge is that apparently state-owned media is pushing this out on Facebook, and it's had extraordinary action. Facebook have come back to say that this is overblown, and that, of course, there's misinformation on all, different international media and so on and so forth. But this is a concern that perhaps China isn't so on the fence about this, is playing both sides and perhaps isn't so even-handed.
No surprises there. Liam, we can't get through an entire morning of paper reviews without talking about the P&O scandal, and you've chosen this story in the front of the Times. What's the latest twist?
Yeah, and later editions it was relegated to the inside pages, but I do think this is an important story. If it wasn't for this spring statement, if it wasn't for war in Ukraine, this would be front and centre every day, because this is one of the biggest industrial disputes we've had for many, many years. P&O have written to the government and they've said, yes, we laid off around 800 people without notice via a pre-recorded Zoom call, but if we hadn't have done that, then we'd have had to lay off 3,000 people, because P&O, now owned by DP World of Dubai, a famous 19th century British shipping name, would have completely gone bust. That's their claim. Do I believe it? Well, I'd have to see the books. It's certainly their sort of public positioning. I think it's interesting that we're seeing a big return to industrial action and strife between unions and employers and the government. This is, of course, a private sector dispute. What I would say, as we go forward, inflation rises, the public finances get tighter, it's the public sector unions in the UK which are really powerful. Just 25% of us are in a union these days, compared to 50% in the late 70s, when we last saw really serious industrial action in the early 80s. So I think the main industrial strife in the months and years to come is going to come from those public sector unions. But this, even a private sector union, the RMT, battling with P&O, and it's causing big ructions. And as I say, if it wasn't for other news, this would be dominating the front pages.
Guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Liam and Emily, thank you. Liam, you're going to be back at 11 o'clock with a special on the spring statement from the Chancellor. Good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
We'll be tuning in. Thank you.
Time's 8:45. A very good morning to you. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Now, it is official. Theatres are back up and open, and I'm sure lots of you have been visiting them. This summer, Olivier Award-winning actress Ruthie Henschel will be taking to the stage, and she will be back entertaining us all.
Well, she's leading a cast of Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine's award-winning Passion at the Hope Mill Theatre, which is in Manchester. And that's going to be from Thursday, the 5th of May through to the 5th of June. And Ruthie Henschel is here to tell us all about Passion, to give us a bit of passion this morning. Lovely to see you, Ruthie.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here.
Who do you play in Passion?
I play Fosca, and she's one of these characters. It's brilliant because it's all about what real love really is. You know, it's not necessarily about the knee trembler. It's more about you know, somebody who loves you no matter what. And Stephen Sondheim was a real master of the human condition. He just knows people, and it's a wonderful piece. And I play Fosca. I mean, there are points in the show where you want to give her a bit of a because she can come across as quite obsessive, but it's a wonderful piece, and we're taking it out to Manchester to sort of try and reinvent it and, you know, see where its life is going from there.
Well, we were looking it up on the internet today, and there are pictures of you looking very scary, all sorts of face makeup on. We weren't exactly sure what that was about.
That, funnily enough, it's all about letters. You know, writing letters in this piece, and that's about the ink. You know, just a visual, but yes, all about the ink and how beaten up she is in life. And this is a great piece for now. There's a lot about mental health in it that is, you know, right on the money.
Yeah, and look, for us lay folk, it's been absolutely amazing getting back into theatres and looking at actors like you in the eyeball. What's it like for you back treading the boards? I mean, is it, you know, many actors and actresses say that's the purest form of acting. They can actually feel the response of the audience. Is that how you feel?
I do. You know, during lockdown, we all went online because that's what we do. We find a way to do what we love. But that's the whole thing about live theatre, is it's a relationship between the audience and the people on stage. And without each other, it's a bit of a one-dimensional experience. It's just not what it is supposed to be. And so having that audience again, and even socially distanced, when we had socially distanced audiences, it means that the audience is slightly less bold, and it means that the people on stage are not getting, you know, that half of the relationship. So it's really so important that we're back with full theatres.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of got left behind a wee bit during this. It was very obvious to me that the government still don't think it's a proper job.
Yeah. I know what you mean. You talk about lifetime relationships, and sadly, our condolences to you in the loss of your mother nearly a year ago now, when all this pandemic was at its height. Did you find, were you socially distanced from her at the end because of what was going on?
Well, this is why I'm campaigning for Gloria's Law, and Gloria is my mother, because every person who's in care should have the right to one person at least that they can have no matter what, whether there's a pandemic, whether there is a war, whatever happens. That everybody's entitled to some kind of family life, or somebody that can speak for them, with them. And that was very obvious to me, because I did an awful lot of watching my mother dying from a care home window because we weren't allowed in. I understood towards the end, because I was campaigning, that I could push for being an essential caregiver. Which meant that I saw her for 5 weeks before she died, but my sisters didn't. And it has been devastating what has happened. I'll just mention one thing. We were in Parliament the other day talking to MPs, and we got a load of people to speak on all sorts of, carers, and a lady with dementia who was told when she went into hospital without her carer, without somebody speaking for her, that the doctor actually said to her, she'd hurt her left hand, and he said, "What do you need your left hand for? You've got dementia." And because they were trying to get people out of hospital as quickly as possible because of the pandemic. And that is what happens when we don't have someone looking out for us. That's why we need Gloria's law.
Well, today is a national day of reflection, marking the second anniversary of that first ever lockdown. We can all remember, can't we, where we were on that day that Boris Johnson addressed us as a nation and said, "I'm afraid you're going to have to stay." It was such a scary moment. And you having the personal loss of your mother, seeing your own industry, as you say, really suffering. It's been a difficult couple of years.
It really has. I mean, we lost my father 2 weeks after the first lockdown, and then my mother a year later. It's been quite a year, and watching my friends who have been in the business all their lives and are so brilliant and skilled, and they were, having to pick fruit and drive vans and do whatever they had to do to look after their families. And I know that people in the theatre weren't the only people doing that. It challenged all of us. And I take my hat off to all the people. I went and sat in a jungle. Well, I didn't sit in a jungle, actually. I sat in a really cold castle in Wales. That was my work that year. Whereas, a lot of people had to do whatever it took because the whole the theatre relies on the restaurants, which rely on the theatre, which relies on the bars, which relies on the travel, which and theatre and the arts brings in 9 billion a year, 9 billion pounds. That's huge amounts. And yet, where was the help when everything went kind of, I was going to say, boobs up? I don't know.
And Ruthie,
don't think I can say the other word.
Is this giving you help, Ruthie, the idea that you're going back on stage, that you're going to play in front of full houses instead of people being socially distanced? I mean, what sort of boost does that give you in terms of esteem, in terms of your mental health?
Oh, it's an incredible privilege to do what I do. I am never, ever going to forget that I get to do what I love for a living and somebody pays me for it, which is insane. So I am very, very grateful. I'm also, it's been a while, so I'm feeling slightly scared. We always do before, we go on stage for the first time in a long time. Honestly, my third week of rehearsal is spent in and out of the toilets, literally crying, not doing anything else, but just, that sense of, oh my God, what am I doing? I can't do this now. And then you get over that, because we're putting ourselves up there, we're doing what we love, but also there's it's not entirely easy.
But there can be no rush, like the rush you get, at the end of the show and the audience are on their feet. You've had an absolute blinder. You've got that camaraderie with the rest of the team. No better feeling?
That's what I love. That's what I love so much. I have to say, one of the hugest things for me and the biggest gifts is being part of a company. You can go and do concerts and you can do your own show. And that's quite a lonely thing. But when you have that camaraderie of the company, there is nothing like it. We laugh a lot, especially in musical theatre.
And you think people are ready for this? People are ready to come in and sit down and be entertained, to be transported to another world?
Yes, I absolutely do. And there's no greater way of being transported than sitting in a dark theatre and being led through a beautiful story or a harrowing story or a whatever story.
Yeah.
Start to finish, you know.
Well, we've got to finish there, Ruthie. Got to cross you and say goodbye. Ruthie Henshaw, she's full of passion and she'll be letting that passion go from Thursday the 5th of May to Sunday the 5th of June at Hope Mill Theatre in Manchester. Have a good one. Full houses to you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We're going to take a break. The time is 4 minutes actually now to 9 o'clock because...
Yes, Robert Hardman is coming in. He's going to be telling us about his brand new biography of the Queen. That's after this.
Hello, good morning. I'm Eamonn Mcfadden. A cracking start out there. Once again, chilly at first, but with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will rise. And again, it's going to feel warm this afternoon, much warmer than you'd expect for the time of year. High pressure sitting to the east. We've again got this gentle southerly airflow. That's bringing predominantly cloud-free skies, but it's also bringing some warmth with it. Now, for the start of the day, a few fog patches, primarily across northeast England, but they lift in the next few hours. And then, for the vast majority, it's blue skies and sunshine for the rest of the day. Outside chance of a shower, for example, the north of Scotland, perhaps the east of England later on. Really the exception here rather than the rule. For the vast majority, it's blue skies, it's dry and it's warm. 15 to 18 Celsius widely. Could get 19 or 20 degrees somewhere like London, Cambridge, Manchester or the far north of Scotland. Into the evening and skies remain clear. I think we'll see a bit more of a breeze there for Cornwall at times through the day. Bit of patchy cloud as well, but thicker cloud arrives into western Scotland, the far north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, perhaps to bring a few light showers by the end of the night. Otherwise, it's clear skies as we wake up on Thursday and another fresh start, a few fog patches, but the sun soon gets to work, lifting those temperatures, lifting the fog. And again, barely a cloud in the sky for parts of eastern Scotland into much of England and Wales. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing those thicker clouds at times through the afternoon and seeing some spots of rain around western coasts and hills. But for the vast majority, it's dry and it's warm again, 15 to 17 Celsius generally. Now, similar weather conditions are expected on Friday and Saturday, so that means widespread sunny skies. But for the north and west of Scotland, for Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud at times and feeling cooler here.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Hello, very good to see you. We're live right across the world on your TV, radio, online. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Chancellor will present his spring statement today to the House of Commons. We'll find out how his decisions will affect the pound in your pocket.
In Ukraine, Russian forces have entered the city of Mariupol after two massive explosions rocked the city. A human rights organisation described it as a freezing hellscape, riddled with dead bodies and destroyed buildings.
And as the Queen is preparing for her Platinum Jubilee this summer, we'll be speaking to the royal biographer Robert Hardman, who's written a brand new biography all about Her Majesty.
And you've been getting in touch with us today about the Chancellor's spring statement. Pete saying handouts distort the balance of the economy. Tax drives previously solvent people into needing handouts. Council tax is the one that kills poor homeowners because it cannot be avoided. Scrap it. So a lot of you got views on these. We'll be reflecting those throughout the programme. You can also tweet at GB News.
So today, the Chancellor is delivering his spring statement to the House of Commons. We can get all the details from our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Look, this wasn't supposed to be such a big event as it has become. Just to explain, first of all, why there is so much attention on the Commons at 12:30 today.
Well, first of all, this was supposed to be a bit of a fiscal update, laying out the lay of the land and moving on the steady course that we had been on, because, of course, the Chancellor gave a fiscal update in January where he set out help for individuals, families and businesses when it came to the energy costs that we're facing, that the government viewed at that point to be a temporary issue as we came out of the pandemic, as more demand grew up in places that were coming out of lockdown, as factories that had sort of slowed down production during lockdown revved it back up. They thought that would be a slow blip in terms of the squeeze on families. Then what happened? Well, Russia invaded Ukraine and the world changed. Suddenly, the energy landscape in particular, from being what could have been a blip as we exited the pandemic, as the world exited lockdowns, suddenly became a fundamental economic shift where the whole of the Western world is looking elsewhere for its energy in particular, but also knock-on effects in terms of the cost of food, which is a really big thing that's affecting inflation. The figures out this morning, food prices going up. We know that Ukraine is a big bread basket for the world. Wheat exports can affect everything from feeding animals to the price of a pint of beer. This is some really significant knock-on effects from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so what was meant to be a little update, a spring statement, is looking more and more like a mini budget.
OK, that being said, how much is he actually going to do different from what we were expecting today? I mean, we knew he was going to be increasing national insurance. Is he going to be doing anything more to try and help families, as he's saying, to stand by working families?
He'll be wanting to be seen to do a lot. Whether or not it will actually, at the end of the balance sheet, be that substantive remains to be seen. We've got a big programme on GB News to analyse exactly what he says and what it means. Because, yes, he'll be taking more money away from some families and businesses in that national insurance hike. But we're also expecting him, with the other hand, to be giving out more cash to people in a sort of complicated manner. So to tot up all of those numbers to see who actually are the winners and who are the losers of this system will take some time after the Chancellor has spoken. We're expecting him to target support. So back in January, when this help for fuel bill system was announced, rather than going for what the Labour Party was demanding in this VAT cut, which would have affected all families, instead he targeted a rebate to the bottom 80% of households. This seems to be what he will likely do or continue to move in that vein today, to target support rather than do broad brushstrokes.
OK, so for example, with the national insurance hike, there's talk that he'll be reducing that threshold so that those who are the least able to pay it will be able to get...
Exactly, mitigating that for the lowest paid. I mean, currently thresholds have been frozen, which means more people are dragged up into those tax bands. If the Chancellor chooses to raise the tax bands, then some of the lowest paid people will be taken out of having to pay that tax. That means, yes, the tax still goes ahead, that he doesn't have to perform an embarrassing U-turn, no matter how much pressure there has been from his backbenchers to do so, and indeed from the Labour Party to do so. So it would mean that people on higher wages would still pay that tax, but people on lower wages wouldn't. The question is, where will that threshold sit? Because there'll be a lot of people who feel like they're not on particularly high wages, but who will still be hit by this tax.
Yeah, and a lot of people saying, Jean Brennan, if we don't increase national insurance, how long will the sick and old have to wait for operations, treatment and care? Or maybe they don't matter. The government is in a catch-22 situation, which is quite right, actually.
Well, this is the point of the national insurance rise. It's a hypothecated tax, and that means all of the money is set in law to go directly to the NHS in those first few years and then to social care later. The tricky thing is, though, every tax goes into the same pot anyway. If the Chancellor is bringing in more cash, for example, as he is with VAT, as prices rise, the VAT receipts rise as well. He'll have billions more to play with than he was expecting because those prices are going up. Potentially that means that the national insurance rise isn't necessary because there's more cash in the kitty in any way. But these are the discussions that have been had over the last few weeks. As I say, I think cancelling that rise is unlikely because of the political U-turn that would be seen.
We'll know for sure by this afternoon. Tom, thank you very much indeed. With the time, it's 7 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with the latest news. In the past couple of hours, official figures show the inflation rate in February rose to 6.2%. That's up from 5.5% in January. This reported by the Office for National Statistics. More on this from 9:30.
The United States and its allies are considering whether to remove Russia from the G20 group following its actions in Ukraine. The measure is likely to be vetoed by other members such as China, India and Saudi Arabia. Instead, it's thought some countries may boycott the meeting.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have visited Bob Marley's home and met Jamaica's sporting greats as they visit the country for day 4 of the royal tour.
That's as protesters gathered at the British Embassy in Kingston with placards and accusations that the monarchies benefited from blood, tears and sweat of slaves.
Prime Minister's paid tribute to what he calls the heroic efforts of NHS staff on the 2nd anniversary of the first national lockdown. Boris Johnson also offered his sympathies to those bereaved by coronavirus, saying those who died will never be out of our hearts and minds.
Now, as we've been hearing, the Chancellor's reportedly going to stand by families and lay out plans to help those facing the cost of living squeeze. But many pensioners are concerned about the crisis.
Let's go to Ellie Costello. She's out meeting some of those feeling the impact at a county bowls club in Essex. Ellie.
Yes, good morning, Eamonn and Isabel, and we are literally going to be bowling into the spring statement today at Essex County Bowling Club. Some of the best players in the country play here. And check this out, I've got special bowling shoes on today. I turned up in the wrong footwear, but it's fine now, it's been rectified. I'm in proper bowling shoes. But we're going to be talking to people today about what they're hoping to see in this spring statement. As you just heard from Tom Harwood there, it's been a particularly hard winter for many people. We've got the prices of food going up, petrol prices are sky high, and we've also got the national insurance contributions, which will also be going up. So lots of people will be looking to this spring statement for some help, really, from Rishi Sunak to make everyday life that little bit easier. But is it going to happen? We'll just have to wait and see at 12:45 today. So let's talk to somebody now about what they're hoping to see from the spring statement. This is Tasha. Tasha loves her pink. Got pink trainers, pink nails, pink hair, pink car. So let's talk first about what a tough winter has been for so many people. How have you been finding your bills? Have they gone up?
They've gone up by £200 a month.
£200 a month. And as you just said, you've got a pink car outside. Is that costing you more as well?
It is costing me a lot. I come here most days and I would say it's probably costing me another £10, £15 every 3 weeks more.
Wow, so £200 more on your bills, £10, £15 more on your petrol. I mean, it adds up, doesn't it, for a lot of people? And of course, we're coming out the back end of a pandemic. Lots of people are still recovering.
Yeah, we're still recovering from the COVID situation. With my husband was furloughed, so we're missing a big chunk of his money, and we're still trying to recover from that. So with the energy going up as well, it's not good.
Yeah, it's tough for lots of people out there, Tasha. What are you hoping to see in Rishi Sunak's statement a little bit later on today?
I'm hoping he's going to cap the energy prices.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be lovely.
Yeah, take some control over those £200 bills. We can hope so. And, you know, we are very lucky, really. There are people who are going to be a lot worse off, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Even in the winter here, you're going to find people are going to come up here because they're not going to want to put the heating on or afford to put the heating on.
So those are older people.
Older people that are going to come up and sit up here.
Older people who can't afford their heating bills at home will come up to the bowls club in order to keep warm. It's shocking, isn't it? Very depressing, really. Well, we're going to try and get some light in this room, I think, whilst we wait for this spring statement. You're going to show us how to do some bowls. Be a bit rude not to, wouldn't it, really? So these are your lovely balls. They are nice balls, nice and pink. Bowls, sorry. Bowls. I've been getting this wrong all morning. Bowls, right. So you're going to show us what to do. So for anyone who hasn't played it before, like me, what is the premise of the game?
Yep. Object of the game is to get your bowl as closest to the jack, which is a small white or yellow ball,
all the way
at the other end.
Right, OK. Show us how it's done then, Tash. I'll come over this side. So you're going to step on the mat?
Going to step on the mat. Your foot has to always be on the mat when you're delivering your bowl.
OK. OK. That's a good lunge there. Good lunge, Tasha. And the plan is it's like a boomerang, right?
Yeah,
so you go out
on it,
and then it bias.
And then it should come in nicely.
Comes back in.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Right, OK, so I think it's my go, isn't it? So is there a pink one for me? No. Oh, is this yours, Richard? Right, here we go. So you've got to grip onto it. It's all in the grip, apparently. Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. So I've got to step on here and lunge. Ah! I think that's quite good. Look.
Oh, yeah.
That's quite good. Oh.
I don't see much boomerang action going on there,
It's just gone in the
Ellie.
ditch over there.
That'll be the nail.
No, well, it's just gone in the ditch, but...
Which would have been fine if you had the jack with it.
Well, I'll keep the practice up, Eamonn and Isabel. I'll keep practice up and we'll get talking to people about what they're hoping to see in the spring statement. We'll have a bit of both today. Back to you.
Yeah, keep the practice up, Ellie, and never confuse your balls with your bowls, OK? See you later on. Look, we've got lots more coming your way in the breakfast programme. We will be speaking to Robert Hardman, the royal biographer. His latest book, The Queen of Our Times, will be on straight after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, she's been on the throne for 70 years, making history as Britain's longest-serving monarch. And this summer, Queen Elizabeth will celebrate her Platinum Jubilee.
She will indeed, and joining us to discuss Her Majesty's historic even reign is royal biographer Robert Hardman, and he has released this biography called Queen of Our Times. Robert, good morning, good to see you.
Good morning.
What makes her a Queen of Our Times?
Well, I think you really know. I mean, you've got to be well into your late 70s and 80s to remember a time when she wasn't on the banknotes, on the coins, on the stamps. You know, when she wasn't at the centre of our national life, and she's just been this remarkable figure on the world stage. She's our longest-lived, longest-reigning sovereign, and you going back to the early days, you just start to build this picture together, and you realise that she is the sort of thread that binds post-war history of this country. Wherever you look at, any particular issue, any moment, in really since the war, she's in there.
But Robert, for a woman who wasn't born to be queen, did that in a way shape her destiny and her determination?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. She obviously her uncle became Edward VIII, was the man who was meant to lead the nation, and obviously the abdication. I think that was the first moment that really sort of shaped her view of kingship, or queenship as we should call it, and then the war, obviously. And you know, there are two in the book I talk about. There are two great mentors who really shaped this reign. One is her father, the king, and the other obviously is the Duke of Edinburgh. And I was very lucky in researching this, in that I was given access to the Royal Archives, which are in the sort of top of Windsor Castle in the big tower. And under lock and key there are the king's wartime diaries, all 11 volumes of them. And the Queen gave me access to have a look at those. And they are fascinating, because they're not just sort of what I did today type diaries. I mean, they're very honest. And at the moment, we talk a lot about, you know, President Zelensky of Ukraine, who's widely admired globally and compared, quite rightly, to Winston Churchill for his leadership. And yet you read those diaries and you see that actually a lot of echoes there with George VI, this sort of dogged resilience, unshowy, you know, leading by example. And I think that's made a huge impact on her. And all the way through her reign, you know, she's always been inspired really by him and by the late Duke.
Look, with a reign of 70 years and being the most recognisable monarch in the world, of course, huge amounts of column inches of books have been written about her. You still managed to find plenty fresh to say. I mean, this was supposed to be, what, 200 pages? It ended up a meaty 700 or so. Give us a flavour of the sort of anecdotes people can find in there.
Well, like me and a few others, I dare say, you know, we all ballooned a bit in lockdown, so it did go on a bit. But no, I mean, I started like exactly as you say as well. I mean, people said, oh, look, there's nothing new to say. And then you start talking to people. You start looking in the archives. You start researching, and there is an awful lot new to say. I mean, some of in terms of her character, one of the things that struck me in talking to everybody who's worked with her is she's often, people have sometimes said, oh, the Queen's a bit slow to react at various times in the reign, but she has never panicked. There's no example of her panicking. She's very steady, she's very assured. If you remember at the start of the pandemic, all the other monarchs in the world were sort of making statements right away and giving a sort of running commentary. But she waited, and one or two people said, well, hang on, why haven't we heard from the Queen? And it's because she was waiting for the right moment. I think her judgment all the way through has been almost spot on. I mean, over 70 years, you're bound to make a few mistakes, but there really aren't very many.
And you talk about speaking to a great deal of people behind this book. I mean, all sorts of people, from presidents of the United States, multiple former prime ministers. Tell us a little bit about who you spoke to.
Well, I spoke to, for example, former prime ministers of this country. I spoke to Sir John Major, who's now her sort of senior former premier.
And what's that? Just set the scene. Are you making a phone call to him, or are you sitting in a hotel lobby, or in the garden drinking tea?
Well, there's the one downside of lockdown, obviously, was with a lot of these people, one could only talk to them on Zoom or on the phone. But on the upside was they were available because they weren't out and about. So I had a very nice chat with George W. Bush. We had a long conversation. It was over the phone. I couldn't obviously get out to Texas, where he now lives. But he's really interesting because he's the US president and possibly the world leader who knows her best, because he first got to know her when his father was president and she came to stay at the White House in 1991. And there was that famous trip, I don't know if you remember, where she's on the White House lawn being greeted by George Bush Sr. and he does a speech of welcome. And then he hands the podium over to the Queen, at which point the podium is meant to go down for the Queen. But it doesn't, it stays fixed, and it's been fixed for a 6'3" president, whereupon no one can see the poor Queen, they just see her hat. And the famous US presidents, the US commentators' remark was, "All I got me is a talking hat." But he was George Bush Jr. He came on a state visit to London. He hosted the Queen's last state visit to the US, and he's just very impressed. One thing that particularly struck him is the fact that she has met and known 14 US presidents, and there's no one else in history who's known. I mean, that's nearly a third of all the presidents they've ever had.
She sets the gold standard, I suppose, for monarchs. But there will come a time that we will have to do without her. Is she very aware of her succession or what happens next?
Yeah, like anyone in charge of a sort of hereditary dynastic institution or family business, if you like. I mean, one of the chief imperatives is you've got to hand it on in as good, if not better, condition than you found it, and that's always mattered to her.
But she'll be a tough act to follow.
Oh, I mean, Prince Charles will have a very hard job. I mean, no question, because in the same way that Edward VII did it when he took over from Queen Victoria. But as with him, I think you've got with Prince Charles, you've got a very experienced heir in waiting. I mean, he, in the same way the Queen is our longest reigning monarch, Prince Charles is our longest serving heir to the throne. He knows what's required. I mean, he's done his homework. I think he's been very correct, and people are always asking, what's he going to be like, what's he going to do? And he's absolutely right not to sort of give us nudges or hints or whatever. It's absolutely, that's for another time. When the time comes, he will have very clearly developed, well thought out plans, but he's not going to air them in public now because it would be disrespectful. He's taking on a lot more of the heavy lifting now. So, for example, the Queen used to do investiture. I mean, she's done hundreds, thousands probably of investitures. Yeah. But now he does most of those. He does the big trips. I think we'll just see gradually, with the passage of time, it just makes sense for him to take on a few more of her duties. But she's still very much in charge.
Do you think it'll be gradual? Do you think it'll be quite radical? I mean, you said earlier that the two characters that have very much shaped her reign were her husband and her father, both of whom have now passed away. And as so often you see in a marriage that, the Queen's health has deteriorated noticeably since the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh. Recent weeks, speculation about whether Her Majesty is in a wheelchair. Lots of concerns about her health. Do you think that we will possibly see less now of the Queen than ever?
I think we'll inevitably see less of her doing the public duties. I think one of the upsides of this ghastly pandemic was the fact that she started getting used to using new technology like Zoom. And in a funny way, we've actually seen more of her in the last year or two, because these events that used to just sort of take place behind closed doors, you just occasionally saw them referred to in the court circular, these meetings with generals or admirals or several days a week, ambassadors coming and going. These are now captured on Zoom. So we see the sort of thing that she's doing behind the scenes. I think we'll carry on seeing that. What I think we'll see less of, I mean, the days of the walkabout, the away day to the regions, the trips abroad. I mean, she hasn't now been abroad actually since 2015, but I think, mobility is something of an issue now. And I also think, I mean, nothing medical. I mean, I'm told by those very close to her that she's in very good spirits, absolutely pin sharp as ever. But there is mobility inevitably when you're coming up to your 96th birthday is an issue. And also dignity. I think it's terribly important. She is the Queen. She wants to be seen as the Queen. She wants to look the part.
Just in a minute or so, you talked about Charles and how he would have a clear vision of what's expected of him. Would she have a close relationship with William?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think for her, she's in a very privileged position, and only really Queen Victoria before her was able to look 3 reigns ahead. And, she can see there's that lovely picture of her sitting there with Charles and William and Prince George. And she has a very good relationship with William and his family. She doesn't sort of tell them what to do. She's not there as a sort of, now look, here's the rule book, here's a textbook. She sort of leads by example. But I interviewed Prince William a few years ago about this, and he just said, she's always there if you want advice. I'm quite sure he and the Duchess will have had a chat with the Queen before going on this trip, for example, to the Caribbean, where the Queen is Queen of all these countries, and they'll have a chat when they come back.
Well, Robert Hardman, your book, Queen of Our Times, has been incredibly well received, not just 700 pages of interviews and experiences, but also photographs. I must say, I've never seen a picture of Her Majesty the Queen, you probably can't see here, in a pair of trousers before. And that caught my eye this morning. This was her aboard HMS Britannia in 1983 in the Western Isles of Scotland.
She loved Britannia, always relaxed on board. That was one of her happiest places, actually. And yeah, she often wearing trousers, and it was where she could just retreat. It's one place it's the only home she sort of designed herself as well.
Good man. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Good read, good luck with the book. On sale now, Queen of Our Times, The Life of Elizabeth II by Robert Hardman. I will say goodbye there. Thank you for watching. We'll be on air tomorrow, 6 through to 9:30. As usual, Tom Harwood up next.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGibbon. A cracking start out there. Once again, chilly at first, but with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will rise. And again, it's going to feel warm this afternoon, much warmer than you'd expect for the time of year. High pressure sitting to the east. We've again got this gentle southerly airflow. That's bringing predominantly cloud-free skies, but it's also bringing some warmth with it. Now, for the start of the day, a few fog patches, primarily across northeast England, but they lift in the next few hours. And then, for the vast majority, it's blue skies and sunshine for the rest of the day. Outside chance of a shower, for example, the north of Scotland, perhaps the east of England later on. Really the exception here rather than the rule. For the vast majority, it's blue skies, it's dry, and it's warm. 15 to 18 Celsius widely. Could get 19 or 20 degrees somewhere like London, Cambridge, Manchester, or the far north of Scotland. Into the evening, and skies remain clear. I think we'll see a bit more of a breeze there for Cornwall at times through the day. A bit of patchy cloud as well. But thicker cloud arrives into western Scotland, the far north of Scotland and Northern Ireland, perhaps to bring a few light showers by the end of the night. Otherwise, it's clear skies as we wake up on Thursday, and another fresh start. A few fog patches, but the sun soon gets to work, lifting those temperatures, lifting the fog. And again, barely a cloud in the sky for parts of eastern Scotland into much of England and Wales. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing those thicker clouds at times through the afternoon, and seeing some spots of rain around western coasts and hills. But for the vast majority, it's dry, and it's warm again, 15 to 17 Celsius generally. Now, similar weather conditions are expected on Friday and Saturday, so that means widespread sunny skies. But for the north and west of Scotland, for Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud at times and feeling cooler here.